Good morning and thank you for joining us. My name is Reagan Bissonnette and I am the Executive Director of the Northeast Resource Recovery Association. Welcome to day 2 of NRRA's Recycling with Results Conference. I would like to extend a big thank you to everyone who participated in day 1 of our conference yesterday. First, we greatly appreciate the speakers and moderators for their time and expertise. And I'd also like to recognize the NRRA staff who are working behind the scenes to ensure that this conference goes smoothly. And that includes Heather, Sam, and Liz. But I'd also like to give a big thank you to everyone who was in attendance yesterday for your great and thoughtful questions for our speakers, and especially our solid waste operators. And I really look forward to hearing more of those today. And also congratulations again to our associate member, Marty O'Brien, winner of our early bird registration drawing yesterday to win a new Think Center Nano computer courtesy of our information technology provider, CCI Managed Services. Now, before we move on, let me tell you a little bit about the Northeast Resource Recovery Association. We are in our 40th year, and we're a unique nonprofit that enables municipalities throughout New England to manage their own recycling programs. Today, we have over 400 members throughout New England, and we achieve our mission of partnering with municipalities to make recycling strong through economic and environmentally sound solutions in 2 key ways. First, we are one of only a handful of nonprofits in the country that directly connects municipalities with the companies that wish to acquire their residential recyclables. We provide strength in numbers for our members because the more members who participate with us, the more favorable terms we can negotiate on their behalf. Last year, we returned over $1.8 million to our members from the sale of their recyclables. We also allow our members to purchase recycling equipment at discounted rates, including storage containers, trailers, baling wire, and compost bins. We have relationships with a wide range of reputable, environmentally responsible vendors so that we can serve as a one-stop shop for our municipal members' recycling needs. Our programs include recycling scrap metal, containers, fibers, electronics, propane tanks, tires, batteries, and more. And the second key way we advance our mission is providing educational programs and hands-on technical assistance geared toward municipal solid waste operators. That includes monthly member operations marketing meetings, where operators can learn about the latest recycling market pricing, hear special presentations on timely topics, and share information with one another. And we also educate the next generation about recycling and waste reduction through our school recycling club. Our annual conference in May is also an important part of our educational services. Last year, we canceled our May conference and instead held an ambitious summer webinar series to make available many of the workshops that would have been held at our conference. This year, although we missed the opportunity to gather in person, we're grateful to be able to gather with you all remotely. And today's conference is designed to share with you speakers who will address a range of topics relevant to keeping municipal recycling financially strong and environmentally sound in keeping with our mission. A virtual conference brings us new ways of connecting, and so I'd like to cover a few logistics for today's conference. Attendees will be muted throughout the conference, and we are recording this conference, and the recording will be made available to you next week for your reference. All attendees will also receive a certificate of attendance following the conference. Now, if you can't hear the presenters' voices, please click on the audio arrow in your control panel and choose computer audio, as shown on the slide. If this does not work, you can select the phone call option and follow the directions to call in. We hope that you will all ask many questions, and our presenters will do their best to answer them as time allows. Click on the question block in the control panel and type in your questions there. And please do keep your questions short and to the point. In addition, you will receive a survey following this conference. It will appear in GoToWebinar at the end of this conference today, and you will also receive it by email. So please do take the time to complete that survey, as we really appreciate your feedback and it will help us inform future events. Now, I'd like to take some time to recognize our sponsors and supporters for this conference. Thanks to the real generosity of our sponsors, we were able to offer this virtual conference for free to all NRRA members this year. First, I'd like to recognize our diamond sponsor, New Hampshire the Beautiful. New Hampshire the Beautiful is a nonprofit supported by members of the New Hampshire Beverage Association, the Beverage Distributors of New Hampshire Association, and the New Hampshire Grocers Association. This collaborative effort by food and beverage companies has developed comprehensive programs to address litter issues, recycling challenges, environmental awareness, and education. New Hampshire the Beautiful accomplishes these goals by offering municipal recycling grants and signs, anti-litter programs, and technical assistance to recycling programs in New Hampshire. And New Hampshire communities are eligible to apply for funding to assist with the purchase of recycling equipment. This includes monies to purchase curbside collection bins, balers, crushers, roll-off containers, and other equipment that will help a community achieve higher diversion rates. New Hampshire the Beautiful has been a longtime supporter of NRRA's education and technical assistance programs to support recycling for New Hampshire municipalities as well as our school recycling club, and we are grateful for their support. We encourage you to learn about our sponsors by visiting the virtual exhibit hall on our website. Our diamond, platinum, and gold sponsors also have virtual exhibit booths there with more information about their work. Next, I'd like to recognize our platinum sponsor, the Glass Packaging Institute. The Glass Packaging Institute is the trade association representing the North American glass container industry. On behalf of glass container manufacturers and their supply chain partners, GPI promotes glass as the optimal packaging choice, advances environmental and recycling policies, advocates industry standards, and educates packaging professionals. I encourage you to check out their new educational flyer called Questions Municipal Recycling Leaders Should Ask About Glass Recycling, which is available through their virtual exhibit booth. Next, I'd like to thank our gold sponsors, Harding Metals, Schnitzer, Interstate Refrigerant Recovery, Good Point Recycling, and Win Waste Innovations, formerly Wheelabrator. The first four are all NRRA vendors, and we appreciate the support of all of our gold sponsors. And this year, we are fortunate to have 11 silver sponsors supporting our conference. I won't read all their names here, but we're very grateful for their support. And similarly, we thank our numerous conference supporters. And that brings us to our first of 3 workshops today. As you can see from the agenda, we are fortunate to have another great lineup of speakers today. We'll start with national and local recycling markets and market specifications. Then we'll discuss plastics with a plan. And we'll end the day briefly discussing NRRA's glass recycling programs, and then finish with understanding end markets. After each hour-long session, we'll take a 10 to 15-minute break because, as we know, it's not ideal to sit in front of a computer for half a day. And on that note, since attendees will be muted and have video off, please also feel free to stand up and stretch as needed throughout the conference. And if you need to step away briefly, we'll be here when you come back. This conference is for you, and as I mentioned, it will be recorded and available for you to reference afterwards. That being said, if you are checking emails and taking phone calls during the conference, you simply won't get as much out of it. So I encourage you to close your email and other applications on your computer and to silence your phone. We purposely scheduled this conference over 2 half days to make it easier for everyone to participate remotely and then still be able to take care of some work in the afternoons. Now I am very pleased to turn you over to Marc Morgan, Solid Waste Manager for Lebanon, New Hampshire. Marc will be moderating our first session, National and Local Recycling Markets and Market Specifications. And thank you for joining us once again, Marc. And it looks like we may not have Marc on the line this morning. So I would be happy to introduce our speakers. We are very fortunate to have Chaz Miller, CEO of Chaz Miller Associates, former director of the National Waste and Recycling Association. And Chaz is going to talk with us about national and Northeast recycling markets. And then we are also very fortunate to have Bonnie Bethune, our Member Services Manager for NRRA, joining us again today to talk about New England markets and specifications. And so now I will go ahead and turn this over to Chaz. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Reagan, and I'm absolutely delighted to be here. It's a beautiful day down in Maryland, and I hope it's a beautiful day throughout the Northeast. I'll be giving an overview of key trends in recyclables in their markets, looking at current prices, and making some predictions. I'm going to focus on two materials in particular. Paper, because it's by far our most important recyclable material, and plastic because of its growth and controversy. Next slide, please. First of all, we got to keep in mind one very important thing. Recyclables are simply raw materials looking for buyers. They're commodities. They're bought. They are not sold. And buyers want reliable quantity. They want reliable quality at an acceptable price. Next slide, please. And let's look at the importance of paper. It's 2/3 of what we collect for recycling in this country. And commercial recycling is almost 100% old corrugated boxes, OCC, the containers you see right there. Residential recycling is 55 to 65% OCC and mixed paper. And that means the paper revenue is absolutely crucial to a program's success. Next slide, please. So how has paper changed in the last 2 decades? It's this raw material that's so important. Well, overall use of paper is down 20% since 2000, and that's virtually all printed paper. Packaging grades of paper are now more than half of US production. The other grades, tissue, towels, et cetera, pretty much grow with the population. Next slide, please. But the pandemic has had a major impact on one grade of paper, and that is e-commerce. I suspect all of us have increased our use of e-commerce over the last 12 months. It's now almost 16% of retail sales, and that is up 1/3 over a year ago. And the impact on recycling has been very clear. In terms of commercial recycling, less quantity and clearly less quality. For residential recycling, the quantity has increased, but it has not made up the gap, and we struggle with quality. Next slide, please. But this is a great shot of who benefits from e-commerce. These are workers at Green Bay Recycling, Packaging, up in Wisconsin, celebrating the opening on March 11th of a brand new mill to make boxes out of OCC and residential mixed paper. 650,000 tons per year of container board coming out of that factory when it's running at full capacity. And it replaces a much smaller plant. Next slide, please. And this is just one example of the extraordinary growth we have seen in capacity in North America for recycled content paper. We've been tracking this at the Northeast Recycling Council now for about 3 years, I think. There are 30 North American recycling capacity conversions, expansions, or new mills that have been announced since 2017. And conversions is particularly important. Those are essentially mills that used to make printed paper that are now making a packaging grade, usually corrugated boxes. Most of those 30 mills use OCC. At least 7 use residential mixed paper as their major input. 5 will make recycled paper pulp, which is this whole new market that really didn't exist 4 or 5 years ago. One of them is for aseptic cartons and one is for food contaminated paper. If they are all built and they all reach their projected capacity, that's 5 to 7 million tons of new capacity. Not all will be built for one simple reason: we just don't need that much new capacity. Next slide, please. This is the status of those new mills. 14 are those expansion projects. 14 have been completed. In terms of OCC, 12 OCC conversions or expansions have been completed. In terms of residential mixed paper, 2 new facilities have opened. That one I just showed you in Wisconsin, and another one earlier in Ohio. And recycled paper pulp is also being made at 3 of the new OCC mills that are doing that. So it's considerable expansion. And that one food contaminated paper, that little outlier, that's in the process of opening. That's out on the West Coast, and I don't think it's going to have much impact right now in the Northeast. That's maybe 3 million tons of new capacity now. Next slide, please. What about plastic? Well, overall use of plastic is up 10 million tons. It definitely is a contrast to paper. It's the second largest material in the waste stream that we can recycle. But keep in mind that 60% of plastic production is for what we call durable products, or products that are going to have a relatively, maybe a year or so. The CD disc, that clip, the clock, the cup, and so forth. Only 40% is packaging, such as that plastic bag and the pill container and the jug. And the reality with plastic packaging is it's getting both lighter and it's getting more complicated to recycling. Next slide, please. In terms of recycling, increased capacity for recycled content plastic, also we've seen a big boom. 30 plus new processing facilities. I'm in the process of updating the data. It looks like about 37 or 38, about 15 or so of those have opened. Most of them make resin. Some, however, make end products such as plastic lumber or strapping or some other things. And there's absolutely no guarantees that all of those will be built. And there's a very real question of where is the supply for all that new capacity going to come from? That's going to be a challenging question. Next slide, please. Let's look at exports. Over the last 2 decades, exports of paper and plastic recyclables exploded. They became an enormous reality and issue for recycling programs. That is over. Next slide, please. In terms of exports of paper, in 2020, 16 million tons. That's down 5 million tons from 2018. That's largely due to the China ban and to the just increased domestic demand in this country. But it's worth noting, in the first 2 months of this year, we exported 2.4 million tons. If we stay at that pace, there's only going to be a slight decrease in paper exports in 2021. And as noted here, India, Mexico, and Vietnam get more than half the exports, and just new overseas markets have stepped up. Next slide, please. It's been a different example though for plastics. 2020, 1.37 billion pounds of plastics were exported. That's down 2.31 billion pounds in 2017. That's a major decline in plastic exports. That's down by almost 2/3. However, again, if you look at January and February, a slight decline from the previous year. But if we stay at the pace of January and February, maybe those total exports will be down 10%. 5/8 of the exports go to Canada, Malaysia, and Mexico, and they simply appear to still be moving. And one quick thought, it's worth noting that plastic exports are always listed in billions of pounds, not in millions of tons. And I think that can be very misleading because 1 billion pounds is 500,000 tons. It sort of changes the scale and the way we look at them. Next slide, please. There are some barriers to exports, no doubt about it. There's shortages in trucks in getting bales to docks. There's shortages in shipping containers. There's shortages in what are called sailings. Now, some of those are structural problems that are going to take a long time to fix if they ever get fixed. In particular, the problem of trucks and drivers for trucks. The good news is that new domestic capacity is clearly diminishing the need for most exports, or for many exports. Next slide, please. Let's look at some prices, because I know this is something people are very, very interested in for obvious reasons. These are national averages. They come out of recyclingmarkets.net. What I'm showing here is both the end of April and 2 years ago. I did 2 years ago because paper prices were spiking a little bit a year ago. OCC has more than doubled. It's $90 a ton now, which is, you look at the high low for OCC, it's about half of the high. Residential mixed paper is up pretty dramatically too, but it's worth noting that delta, the spread between the price of residential mixed paper and OCC is greater now than it was 2 years ago. Next slide, please. This is a little graph that I created. It shows the prices at the end of April for the 11 years, 2011 through 2021. And what this shows you is, it gives you an idea of the fluctuations. And you'll see a similar slide for two of the plastics. OCC was at its absolute height in 2011, almost $180 a ton. That was when Chinese markets were importing the most and paying the most. It went down, green fence. It spiked, oddly enough, during National Sword as mills started hoarding inventory, and then it went down. Next slide, please. Let's look at plastics. Well, what can I say? PET is still not above where it was 2 years ago, but you look at natural HDPE, you look at colored HDPE, you look at polypropylene, they are all setting record prices. Stunning increases for those three. Next slide, please. This is the PET equivalent of the chart I showed earlier. It too peaked in 2011, but for a very different reason. We were paying in 2011 prices of $3.50 to $4 a gallon at the pump for gas. Gas was at an extraordinary high, and that just raised the value of recycled PET tremendously. Those prices disappeared, fracking came in, we got more gas, and now you see where prices have gone for PET. Next slide, please. And this is HDPE natural in that same time period. And it's just the opposite. It was very low in 2011, and it stayed low, and then suddenly it took off, and it took off. There's a shortage of supply compared to the demand for natural HDPE. It's a very versatile, adaptable polymer. There's a lot of brands that can buy natural HDPE, and they can meet those brand commitments. So that's just been shooting the price up tremendously. Next slide, please. This is metals, and I apologize, that should not be national region. That was my typo. These are national prices, not Southeast. But again, you see both aluminum and steel cans have gone up tremendously, all-time high for aluminum, for steel cans. It's kind of interesting with metals because you just have tremendous demand versus a limited supply. For steel, it's China, and their mills need more scrap. And by the way, we export 18 million tons of metals every year. Nobody seems to complain about metal exports. It's plastic exports that simply get everybody's goat. And aluminum, there's just a lot of demand and not enough supply. So those prices I think they'll stay good for a while. Next slide, please. I'm going to make some predictions. I got some good ideas, but I will point out that January of last year, speaking in Connecticut on markets and making predictions, I never mentioned the pandemic. Who knew? So there's always some uncertainty with predictions and I think they tend to reflect our own biases. Next slide, please. For paper, I think markets are going to be stable or rising. In fact, I think they're going to just rise more. The price of virgin pulp is rising. When the price of virgin pulp rises, that pushes up the price of recycled paper. Linerboard companies are now complaining about what they're paying for raw materials, yet they're also increasing prices. And that's a good sign. They're able to pay more for raw materials, whether it's virgin pulp or it's recycled paper, and people are paying the price. The big question is retail stores and e-commerce. Once retail comes back to normal, will e-commerce slow down or even go down? And it's worth noting that in the third and fourth quarters of last year, e-commerce sales actually did go down as percentage as stores did start to reopen. However, one of the national mills, the companies that uses a lot of recycled fiber to make its products, recently predicted a $30 per ton increase for OCC this year. I think that's probably likely. So I think the news is simply very good there. Let's look at plastic. Next slide, please. Who knows? There's so many variables out there. There's the lingering impact of the Texas freeze. How high will oil prices go? A month ago, you heard predictions of $4 a gallon at the pump. Now you're not hearing those anymore, although clearly they are going up. How real is brand demand? Is it real or is it just PR? And I'll say one thing very clearly. I don't care about 2025 goals. I care about 2021 goals and 2022 goals. And I really care If you know that the CEO gets part of his or her compensation package for 2021 by increasing recycled content, and if that person is then told all the procurement people they are authorized to pay more for recycled plastic than for virgin, that's where you show true brand commitment. And there's a question of, are these current high prices sustainable? Next slide, please. This is what you want, friends. You want Goldilocks prices. You want prices that are neither too hot nor too cold, where everybody is making money, both buyers and sellers, and nobody is stealing the stuff at the curb or the dock. We're close to that. We're getting there for OCC and residential mix. We're not there yet, but we're getting there. We're beyond that for HDPE and polypropylene. And I question how long those prices can sustain themselves at that level. I would just leave you with one thought. Continue to focus on quality. Quality is eternal. Markets come and go. And just the final slide. This is my contact information. If you want a copy of the slides and the speaker points, I know they'll be available for NRRA, but they'll also be available for myself. And feel free to contact me if you have any other questions after we do the Q&A here. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
sources. That's it.
Thank you, Chaz. So next, like he said, we will be doing Q&A at the end. Next, we have Bonnie Bethune, Member Services at the NRRA Extraordinaire, and years of experience managing municipal programs. So Bonnie's going to give us a more localized perspective. And again, thank you, Chaz, and hit it, Bonnie.
Well, thank you, Mark, for that introduction. And certainly thank you for all your help with our conference. You've been here throughout, so we appreciate that.
Except I was late this morning.
You're forgiven. Reagan took care of that, no problem. And thank you, Chaz, for your always valuable national perspective. You have also been with us throughout many conferences, so we appreciate you being here.
Bonnie, we're seeing your, not your presentation, we're seeing your note slides.
Oh, okay.
Monitors.
Can you help me out, Heather?
Yes, just do display settings and swap presenter view. Excellent.
Ah, that's what I needed to do yesterday. How's that?
There you go.
Beautiful. Okay. All right. All right. So very interesting how national and local recycling markets and market specifications. I'm going to be saying similar things to what Chaz was saying, just from the local perspective. So what a difference a year makes. In March of 2020, we were all knee-deep in COVID-19 concerns. From a local recycling perspective, two of major concerns were how to safely operate essential recycling facilities during a pandemic, and uncertain recycling markets and pricing during a pandemic. Okay, my keys aren't working. Okay, what do we do here?
Did you try using your keyboard arrows?
Yep, they're not going up or down, so I must have changed something. So I will use my mouse.
Yeah, exactly.
That's not working either. There we go.
Here you go.
Thank you guys for just hanging in there. Let's look at baled cardboard, or as Chaz mentioned, OCC, old corrugated containers, and we often use this. We have a lot of acronyms in our industry. So if we look at baled cardboard from March of 2020 to March of 2021, we see that NRRA members marketed 225 tons more in March of 2021. This will probably be no surprise to operators who have seen that influx of cardboard coming in from people using Amazon and so on and so forth. The average revenue is up $39 a ton, and the average net revenue for a tractor trailer load is up $812 a load, and the net revenue to members for that 1 month comparative was up almost $43,000 to NRRA members for that 1 month. Current revenue for cardboard, if you're shipping loose to market, $37.50 to $60 a ton. If you're shipping baled, $105 to $125 a ton. We've been here before. Let's see if we can stay here for a while. The majority of NRRA's baled cardboard goes mill direct, and the mills are located in New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Vermont, and New York, and potentially in the future in Maine. Current value of a 1,000-pound cardboard bale is $62.50 compared to $28 a bale in March of 2020. Here's a look at Tuftonboro, New Hampshire's cardboard bales. I took their example because this is exactly what the mills want to see. You can also see that they use 4x4 spacers in between their bales, and this is very handy when you go to load a trailer. Next material to focus on is baled plastics, multiple categories, as you know. Number 1, PET, number 2, HDPE natural, number HDPE mixed colored, number HDPE Z bales, which is a combination of natural and mixed colored, number 1 through 7, and number 3 through 7, which is our newest market, and you'll be hearing more about that as the months progress, and rigid plastics, which is an underutilized market. Let's look at plastics the same way we looked at cardboard. March of 2020 to March of 2021. NRRA members marketed 78,000 pounds more in March of 2021. The average revenue is up 2.5 cents a pound, and the average net revenue for a tractor trailer load was up $603 a load. Net revenue to members over $8,000 for that 1 month comparative. If we look at baled plastics throughout the year of 2020, 2 things stand out. The most revenue to members, of course, was that HDPE natural, over $62,000 over 2020. And if you look at the number of tons, the number 1 through 7 category is the highest at 318 tons, with number 1 PET very close behind. If we look at baled percentage by weight, you'll see that 40% was the 1 through 7 and 37% the PET. So 77% of all plastics marketed in 2020 by NRRA members was number 1 PET and 1 through 7. The remaining plastics was 33% was all other types. Here's a look again at Tuftonboro, New Hampshire's loose plastic program, and these are mainly 1s and 2s. That's how they choose to do that program. Here's a look at Northampton, New Hampshire's number 2 HDPE natural bales. I use Northampton a lot because these bales are just spectacular. You'll notice that they do use cardboard headers, and we do have some plastics vendors who will not take those, but we also have others who will take them with headers. Here's a look at Springfield, Vermont's number 1 through 7 plastic bales. Again, you can see the headers, but so far our 1 through 7 vendors can take headers on the vertical bales. After a very quick overview of plastics and cardboard pricing, let's look at specifications. Keywords for all materials, loose or baled, are clean, dry with undercover storage, and 2-stage separation. Recall that 2-stage separation is when residents bring material into a facility, they place it in a separate bin, staff goes through, pulls out any contaminants, and then the staff puts it into its final container or into the baler and ready to go to market. Cardboard specs. Can't say corrugated cardboard only enough. This is what the mills want. I have to send pictures for every load that we ship to prove to them that it is cardboard, corrugated cardboard only. So no wax cardboard, which it just won't break down in the mill pulper. No chipboard, as in cereal boxes, and no wet strength. That's soda cartons or beer cartons or anything that has that plastic, that shiny plastic coating on it. Here's a look at Leominster, New Hampshire's loose cardboard program. Residents bring their material in, they put the cardboard in that mesh container. The staff goes through it, picks out anything that doesn't belong, and then staff puts it into the open top container. Another look at Northampton, New Hampshire's cardboard bales. They're clean, they're dry, They're undercover, and again, they've used those separators for ease in loading trailers. Here's Bartlett, New Hampshire's undercover storage solution. It may not be a building, it may not be a container, but it certainly does the job. Mixed paper. Chaz talked about mixed paper pricing, and boy, if you can keep up with that. The current pricing is for loose is between $10 a ton cost and $55 a ton revenue. For baled, between 30, and we've had loads go for as high as $100 a ton revenue. The less wet strength, soda and beer cartons or frozen food boxes, the lower the cost or the higher the value. Again, I have to send pictures of the material that we ship through NRRA, so they're looking for that material to not be there. If we look back at March of 2020, the cost was between $10 and $100 a ton. Cost again, which prompted some communities to stop recycling mixed paper for a time. Here's a sample spec question from Lisbon, New Hampshire. Can pizza boxes be baled with mixed paper? Well, there's 3 answers to that question. Corrugated pizza boxes, the non-greasy part, is okay to put in with a corrugated cardboard. The paper pizza boxes, again, the non-greasy part, is okay to put in with a mixed paper. The frozen food pizza boxes, which are wet strength, are not recyclable due to the plastic coating. So please treat these as trash, just like soda and beer cartons. Here's a look at newspaper, or what we call number 8 news. The current revenue loose in Gaylord boxes is between $90 and $100 a ton, and for baled between $140 and $150 a ton. Now this is newspapers only, and it's okay to include the inserts. The end use is insulation, and this is in high demand. Another category that some of our communities do is sorted office paper, or SOP. Current revenue loose in Gaylord boxes between $75 and $80 a ton, and baled between $100 and $105 a ton. And this includes white and colored office paper only. Plastic specs. We could spend 3 or 4 conferences just on plastics. Stored under cover, but this is not only for weather, but also to limit the ultraviolet degradation from sunlight. Some markets accept cardboard headers, as we spoke about, some do not. Some markets accept 5-gallon water jugs, some do not. Plastic separations leads to higher revenue. If we look at 1 through 7 bales, they're between 4.5 and 5 cents a pound revenue. Number 1, PET, your soda bottles, between 9 cents a pound and 14 cents a pound revenue right now. The pricing and demand for PET is finally improving after months and months of oversupply. Number 2 HDP, mixed colored and Z bales is between 29 and 39 cents a pound revenue. Here's an example of Hancock, New Hampshire's number 1 PET bales. Again, clean, excuse me, clean, no cardboard headers, and undercover. Let's talk about number 2 HDP natural bales. Right now they're selling for 80 to 90 cents a pound revenue and still climbing. This is the highest price in NRRA history as far back as 2006. HDP natural is the purest plastic. It can be reprocessed into any color, unlike number 2 HDP mixed color, which can only be reprocessed into dark green and black products. The current value of 1 800-pound bale is $720, compared to $387 in March of 2020. Loose plastics are shipped to local recycling vendors in New Hampshire or Vermont, or to the Keene, New Hampshire consolidation site. Baled plastics are shipped to processors in Michigan, New York, Ohio, North Carolina, or Canada. And the strong overall plastic pricing is counteracting current high transportation costs, with haul fees between $1,300 and $2,200 a load. Warner, New Hampshire achieved an NRRA member first. Their baled number 5 polypropylene was shipped to market in March of 2021. And as you can see, these are mainly tubs and lids. So congratulations, Warner, New Hampshire. Let's look at other commodities. Aluminum cans. Current revenue For loose is 36 cents a pound, and for baled, 59 cents a pound. And you're going to hear UBCs as another term, used beverage containers. That's all we want to see in there. Used beverage containers only. No pet food cans, even if they're aluminum. No steel cans, no foil, or no foil plates. Here's a look at Guilford, New Hampshire's UBC bales. As you can see, they've used a trick of the trade. They've numbered the bales. So in a quick glance, when they call me to let me know that they have a load, they can look out and say, I've got 32 bales. And then I'll know what their weight is and what I'm going to put to bid for marketing. Steel cans, current revenue for baled, up to $264 a gross ton on the Canadian market. For loose, between $80 and $90 a gross ton in the local markets. Steel cans consist of steel cans, pet food cans, empty paint cans, empty aerosol cans, and foil plates. Steel cans are measured in the gross tons compared to the net tons. Scrap metal and light iron, currently between $155 and $160 a gross ton. I had to change this slide just 2 days ago because it jumped up $20 a ton. Many communities are putting steel cans in with their scrap metal until the loose steel can pricing improves. And scrap metal and light iron is also measured in gross tons. Glass recycling, and we're going to talk about this later on in another workshop, but there's 3 NRRA options. First, you can mix your material together with glass jars and bottles and ceramics and porcelain and window glass, and you can deliver to 3 of NRRA host sites, 1 in New London, New Hampshire, 1 at Waste Management in Rochester, New Hampshire, and 1 in Littleton, New Hampshire. The end use is processed glass aggregate or PGA. The second category is glass jars and bottles only, and this is a very strict spec. And those are delivered to Lebanon, New Hampshire, or Keene, New Hampshire. And they are made into fiberglass insulation or glass-to-glass recycling. And if you live on the Cape, you have an option in Dennis, Mass. to bring your glass jars and bottles only to their site, and it is made into PGA. Glass pricing varies depending on the delivery site, but tipping fees are still less than half the cost to put it in with your municipal solid waste. And why recycle glass? Glass will not burn in an incinerator, will not break down in the landfill, and is high costs in MSW due to weight. Crushed glass is available to New Hampshire transfer stations and highway departments for road base and drainage projects from our NRRA host sites. There's a great potential to capture more glass for processing. This is one of my favorite pictures in recycling. This is glass before and after crushing into PGA. And this is creating a local product for local use. We don't have to take it very far. Bring it to a hub and get it crushed, and then it's available for use as road base or drainage. Here's a look at Keene, New Hampshire's host site, where material is brought into Keene. It is reloaded into containers of 30, 35 tons and shipped up to Canada, where it is processed into a small size and then brought back to the United States to be made into fiberglass insulation. Here's a look at Dennis, Mass. and the NRRA host site on the Cape. Finally, let's look at single stream. Member costs per ton have changed from 2020 to $149 to $165 a ton. In March of 2021, looks a little bit better, between $91 and $118 a ton. And this is due to those markets that are just so much better. 57% of New Hampshire's population, or 29% of the New Hampshire communities, are single stream. And although some communities have returned to source separation over the last few years, that is still a high percentage that is a single stream product. To wrap things up, as we've seen, markets have improved for most commodities over the last year, and demand remains steady for high quality, what I call New England hand sorted material. Meeting the highest spec gives NRRA the ability to market member material to all mills and brokers to obtain the most revenue or least cost in the case of mixed paper for your recyclables. I focus today on just one facet of the services to NRRA members: access to the ever-changing and ever-exciting commodities market. Please reach out to me with your specific questions regarding specs and market pricing. There's my contact information, and please keep on recycling and stay safe. Thank you again.
Thanks, Bonnie.
Thank you, Mark.
All righty. So there we have our national and local perspectives. I'm going to go through some questions, but I think it's also important to point out, as Bonnie kind of went through all the specifications and pricing, and it's interesting to note that all those pricing and specifications are helpful in that each community has to make a decision for themselves on what works best for them. One of the questions was about the difference between plastic specifications as far as 1 through 7 versus 1. I know here in Lebanon, we do 1 through 7. And if it's okay, I'd like to answer that question because it was a decision that was made based on a lot of factors. It's not just a revenue versus, this revenue versus that revenue. There's a lot of factors. The reason we moved from separating plastics to a 1 through 7 was a staffing issue. For us, we were spending too much time arguing with the public about what a number 1 plastic was or what a number 2 was. And that was just for us here in Lebanon. So to resolve that, we went to a mixed plastic. We call it a mixed plastic, but it's really a containers only type plastic recycling program. So it just helped address some staff morale issues. People were really getting angry because plastic specifications, the specification on the recycling side wasn't changing, but what people were purchasing in stores was changing. I know yesterday we talked about number 1 thermoform plastics are not really number 1 plastics. It's treated differently with some vendors. So it creates confusion. So for us, we just didn't have the staff time to manage the one-on-one with residents because the throughput is much higher. So those are things that people need to juggle when looking at some of these specifications. You might look at it and go, well, it would be so much easier to do this, but if you have the staff time to actually sort out those higher value commodities, you will always have a good market available. So the NRA provides a lot of options, but there are other factors that go into making those decisions. I'm not sure if you guys have anything to add to that as far as specifications.
Bonnie, you're the one who's directly involved in selling. You've got the experience on the specs every day.
Well, just looking at the percentage of 1 through 7 that we're doing now, if I go back and I keep track of each year to year back, it's just increasing more because of what Mark suggested, that it's just easier to put that material in. And you're capturing the 5s, and that's what they're looking for next. 1s, 2s, 5s is the next valuable commodity, and that captures that. Is everything in that 1 through 7 mix captured? There's probably a small percentage that is not, but even the 3 through 7 is shipped to Canada, and that is pulled out to get the most valuable product. So you're really given an opportunity to capture as much plastics as possible.
So Chaz, are you seeing similar things nationwide? I mean, those are decisions. It's interesting when you looking at a MRF perspective, it's, those kind of minutia decisions are probably comparable. I know some of the MRFs in our area are struggling with labor. MRFs are looking at artificial intelligence for sorting and different technologies. So it's not dissimilar nationwide or even at larger facilities having to make those decisions.
That's absolutely correct. And for instance, where I live in Maryland, we sell the plastic thermoforms, the ones that are used for food packaging, largely because if you can put those in a PET bale. The markets that we have are fiber markets, and they're willing to accept somewhere between 5 to 10% of the bale not being bottle PET, but being the non-bottle PET, because their process can tolerate up to that amount. You get above that amount, and then they run into their own set of production problems. And that truly varies all over the country.
Right.
And it also varies by the capability of the MRF. And the extent to which they've been able to invest in particularly in artificial intelligence and the new robotic arms and the optical sorting. That's clearly the future of MRFs, but it ain't going to happen overnight because you don't make that equipment in a day, and you don't just reconfigure a MRF overnight. That you're talking in some cases some very serious engineering and re-engineering.
Okay. No, that's good to know, because we do hear about some of these upgrades and see them at conferences. And I was interested to hear your discussion, Chaz, about capacity, particularly domestic capacity, and how that's coming online. Is it, I mean, the door being shut for some exports thing happened it didn't actually happen rapidly. It was a slow close, and then when it was closed, it was closed. But we weren't building capacity until that door got closed. Are we keeping in step with that capacity need, or is there still a bit of a lag?
Actually, for paper, we're keeping in step, and some of the earliest expansions on the corrugated side were pre-National Sword. You had companies that were seen already in 2015, 2014. You could see the rise of e-commerce. The beauty of e-commerce is you need more boxes to ship smaller packages to individual households than you need to ship the same products to a big box store. It simply uses more corrugated. So they were already in the process of expanding capacity. And then the Chinese action just spurred a lot of other interest. On the plastic side, definitely it was the cutoff and it was the ban. And it is true that other countries are importing more plastics, but we're going to see more capacity in this country.
Okay. One of the questions that came up, and I know it was mentioned yesterday by Dawn, was about the carton recycling. Kelly Green Board that's opening up in June in Massachusetts. Do either of you have any comments on that? What are they looking for as far as capacity, and what are some of the specs that people might anticipate?
I can answer that. Yep.
Go
ahead,
for it.
Chaz.
No, I just had experience with them. Go for it.
We were approached, NRRA was approached by Kelly Green Board back in the fall of last year. And so we've had some open discussions about how can we collect cartons. And, this would be a great school program. And we approached a couple of our communities. So it's in discussion. Can we separate out these things? It is such high value paper in those containers. We're talking, the milk cartons, the juice cartons, that sort of thing. They were working on the specs at that point in time. So this has moved pretty quickly. So we'll be keeping people up to date on that.
Okay, and I know, Bonnie, you had mentioned wet strength cardboard. I say cardboard, paperboard. What else might be included in that carton spec? Is it going to be the wet strength? Is it going to be ice cream containers? What are some of the oddball items that we're looking at diverting?
Not necessarily the wet strength, which would be your pizza boxes, your frozen food boxes. That's not part of this spec. If Reagan has a different idea, maybe she could chime in.
The one clarification I would give is that actually the carton end market is opening up in Connecticut, not Massachusetts, but they are interested in material that might be up in New Hampshire.
Okay, so stay tuned to this emerging market. A very quick question. Somebody asked, what is a MRF? It's a material recovery facility. Again, we apologize for all the acronyms for those who have been in the industry probably far too long. And they just seem to roll off. How long does it take to, I'm going to go through some of the chat questions if that's all right.
Absolutely.
How long does it take to accumulate enough plastic to make a bale? For us, it's interesting. Over the last 2 years or 3 years pre-pandemic, we used to do a bale a week of 1 through 7 plastics. We are now doing 3 to 4 bales a week. When we moved from assorted plastic, separating the 3 grades out, and moved to a mixed plastic, we increased our plastic diversion by about 20%. I don't know that that's true diversion because we had a lot of junk in there. So we did see an increase in collection, but I don't know that that necessarily means an increase in good recycling. So don't be fooled by collection versus recycling. We're asked, Chaz, what's the national recycling rate?
Oh,
EPA
come on.
You have a dartboard?
for corrugated?
No, do you have a dartboard?
I'm sorry, what's the question?
I just asked, do you have a dartboard as far as a number?
Oh, yeah, I think the problem is recycling rate really did not decline last year. EPA had found a lot more food waste.
Yep.
And once you start figuring out how much food waste is generated in yard waste, you're really getting into uncertain terrain in terms of accuracy.
Yep. It's interesting to note also when people are comparing state to state recycling rates, be careful. An example is New Jersey includes chum with their recycling rate. So each state calculates their recycling rate a bit different. Some people include sinking ships as reef reproduction in their recycling rate. So it can be very funky the way rates are calculated. So just be cautious about looking at neighbors. Make sure you understand how they calculate their rates.
Mark, what is chum?
Chum is what's used to get fish to come to the boat. It's just food yuck. It's usually fish scraps coming out of a processing plant that they use to bait fish in. So.
Well, the best state recycling rates are the ones that give you a breakdown of what they include.
Yep.
So you can then look at those numbers and figure out where they differ from what you're counting.
Right. And Chaz makes it's important to note what Chaz mentioned about food scraps, that EPA this year is starting to include that. And that number is very likely to rise over the next several years as that calculation gets a bit more refined. So these are activities that may have already been happening. It may not be new diversion. It's just newly calculated in the equation. Question for Bonnie. Does single stream recycling require curbside pickup, and do your prices reflect this?
It does not require curbside pickup. There are many facilities that actually have drop-off programs for single stream recycling, even very small communities that have compactors and so on. This was a question that came up prior to the conference. Why single stream compared to separating out into the products, but certainly ease in collection curbside. Those towns or cities that are doing curbside collection, we're not going to see them turn back to separating out product. We have seen some communities, Guilford, New Hampshire, Rollinsford, New Hampshire, that have gone from single stream back into source separation. But it definitely, ease of collection curbside is a reason for single stream, and ease of collection at the drop-off facility. Less equipment needed, and in theory, less staff, but we haven't really seen that in process out there in practice. And certainly, as we talked about the different revenues for commodity, certainly separating out that material is much better than paying the $91 to $118 a ton right now for single stream recycling. And some communities are not even collecting single stream because of that high cost. So they're paying for it in their MSW for sure.
And it's important to note as well with single stream, one of the things that's been on a lot of the lips of haulers is this notion of recycling right. And we heard about some of these issues yesterday with Megan Terrio talking about, just contamination rates. NRRA, the Northeast Recycling Council recently put out a report that said that almost a third of what's going into these single stream facilities in the Northeast shouldn't have gone in there. So when we look at these high prices, I think it's unfair to get angry always at the haulers and the processors, because some of that increased cost is because we're putting the wrong things in there and they're having to dispose of our trash. So make sure your residents and customers understand what is acceptable and what's not acceptable. Those are just critical pieces to that equation. Chaz, did you have something?
Yeah, I was just going to add, I live in Montgomery County in Maryland, 1 million people plus. We have a dual stream program countywide, with the exception of one municipality. We, as a result of dual stream, have very, very clean paper. We have never suffered for a lack of paper markets. They always haven't paid a lot, but we've always had them.
Yep.
However, that commingled part, the cans and bottles, there is still a lot of contamination in it. So what dual stream really does is it cleans up one stream, but it doesn't guarantee the other stream is not going to be dirty.
Right.
So we still have to do a lot of processing.
Just to clarify, dual stream is fibers in one, cardboard, paper in one container, and then all of your containers in the other, your aluminum cans, steel cans, plastics, and glass. So we have a number of communities that actually take out the glass. So I call that dual stream with a twist, because the glass is separate. But single stream programs can also do that, is separate out that glass, separate out that heavy part, and deal with the glass other than through the single stream plant.
Yep. The next question that comes up is one we've all been plagued with for years, and I don't know that there's a very good answer ever, and that is, what about styrofoam? We've heard of markets being opened up, and that market just goes up and down, and it seems like as soon as we collect it, that market disappears. So any comments on styrofoam?
Nationally, the problem is, the technical name for styrofoam is expanded polystyrene, and it's that expanded is what makes the problem. You collect that for recycling, you're collecting air that's sort of being held together by polymer.
Yep.
And it just makes it very expensive to collect and recycle. There are markets for it, but it's a hard thing to recycle.
Yep.
So this expanded foam for all of your, this is the packaging that's around televisions when you get them. And I may be the only person in this whole group that has ever made a bale out of expanded polystyrene. And you could basically lift it up with one hand. It was just so, and kept about a half a load, and the only place was New Jersey, and it just made no sense to truck a load of a few hundred pounds down in New Jersey. So those eventually went into the waste, but let's just produce less of it. If we could just produce less of it, that would be the answer.
So a follow-up question to this ties into styrofoam and mixed plastic bales. Doesn't accepting 1 through 7 plastics mean accepting a contaminated stream? Number 1 through 7 includes styrofoam and plastic film. And that we do a 1 through 7 containers only. So it's not a true mixed plastic. We push people to use local grocery stores and retail outlets for film plastic. We don't accept styrofoam. It does create confusion, as this question kind of details. So plastic recycling is something that consumes the most of my time. And there's so much confusion about plastic, and it's always changing. But a number 1 through 7 is not a true 1 through 7. It's still very specific in that. So
yes, certainly our program does not include anything but containers, as Marc said. and no expanded foam
Or black plastic.
or black plastic.
Yep.
And again, it's up to markets. There are some mixed plastic markets that are happy to just have a bale of 1 through 7 and they'll do the processing. It depends a lot on the end markets.
Yep.
Mhm.
There is a question on any thoughts on the energy required for plastic production versus use of plastics in regards to climate change. Any thoughts on that? That's an enormous, that's like a conference right there.
That's its own session. The bottom line is that plastics are extremely lightweight. If you do a cradle to grave analysis of plastics compared with their competitors, even accounting for recycling, they come off looking very good. The downside is that the irresponsible use of plastics creates major problems, in particular with litter, in particular with ocean debris. And what makes plastic such a tremendous package, it's lightweight, it's easy portability, creates its own set of problems that we just don't have an answer for.
No, and that, Chaz, you're absolutely right. And I think people get lost in some of that. And you're right, I've looked at some of those life cycle analysis and it is challenging. We have some local food and beverage producers who are struggling with that as far as packaging. You know, we have a hard cider producer in our area whose glass bottles come from Germany. So empty glass comes from Germany to the Northeast because of the acidic nature of that product, and that particular glass is what works for him. So he's moving to a pouch, which has environmental benefits because the transportation footprint is smaller. It's produced in this country, but some folks would say, but I can't recycle it.
Mhm.
Okay, but your glass bottle's coming from Germany. You know, when you really start adding things up, and it's not as easy as, you know, just looking at a product, because each product is produced in different locations and recycled in different locations. So it's a very complicated question, and it's just not as easy as saying this is better than that, because it's not always that clear. That line is not always very straight. Let's see here, going through the questions some more. There was a question about soiled pizza boxes. I know, Bonnie, you had mentioned pizza boxes, and you know, I think the question really is, what is soiled? What it comes down to is how greasy is too greasy.
Any grease is really a problem. I mean, we wouldn't save that in our own recycling area at home. I mean, we wouldn't set it there just because it's dirty, it needs to be thrown away. So those of us who are dedicated would just rip that pizza box in half, throw away the greasy part, and collect the good part with our recyclables. So yeah, we've had some mills say that, oh, we can handle those, and then they've stepped back and said, you know what? No, we do not need that material. And so again, clean as you would have it in your own house.
And sometimes those specifications change based on the market. You know, if there's a real hunger for material, all of a sudden greasy pizza boxes are not a problem. So we start taking them in. Then when the market goes south, it's like the Corona bottle episodes, you know, 20 years ago, where it wasn't a problem until, you know, that demand started to go down. So it's important to understand the specifications and stick with them and not fiddle with them with the markets. Because when that market goes down, your greasy pizza boxes are going to be a problem.
Right, and wet strength would be more acceptable when the demand is high. We certainly have seen that, and like you said, keeping to that spec and staying with it, it teaches not only, you know, staff, but it teaches residents that yes, this is acceptable always, not just, you know, momentarily. So yeah.
Right. Chaz, you were going to say something?
Just that the company that makes pizza boxes, Pratt, now has 5 mills operating in this country, and I remember about 3 years ago at a conference, their president saying, we have no problem taking back pizza boxes. We make them, we recycle them. And I think that as mills progress and they get better stock prep systems, it becomes less and less of an issue.
I see Heather. I look at the time and it's 9:10. She's a good bookkeeper, and our session is coming to a close. I thank you, Chaz and Bonnie, for your insights to these markets, and hopefully our attendees have enjoyed the conversation.
And thank you, Marc and Bonnie, and definitely Heather and NRRA. Excellent conference.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you all for your informative presentations and that great conversation. That was wonderful. That's really why we're here. Excellent. We are going to be moving to a 15-minute break now. So feel free to stretch your legs and get a snack. We will return at 9:25 a.m. for our next session, Plastics with a Plan, Municipal Options. Thank you. Well, welcome back, everyone. Now it's time for our next session, Plastics with a Plan, Municipal Options. Marc Richardson, who is a retired transfer station coordinator for the town of Hampton, New Hampshire, and an NRRA board member, will moderate. I'll turn it over to you, Marc. Marc, you're going to want to unmute. It's the second symbol down with the microphone. You were fine this morning. Well, let's see. Okay. Well, I will go ahead and introduce the first speaker. We have Joe Gore is from Wakefield, New Hampshire, and he will be speaking about his plastics program there in the town. Joe?
Hello, can you hear me?
Good morning. Well, yeah, good morning. Yes, I can. Continue.
Okay.
And mine's unmuted now, finally.
Okay. Hi, Marc.
It just wasn't going. I was clicking on it, nothing was happening. So, all right. Go ahead, Joe.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. I'm going to say I'm not an expert in either the plastic or the recycling and solid waste field. I've just come on board, taken over the transfer station late 2019 from the highway department. So I'm pretty new at this, but a number of things that I took into mind when I came here was what we were doing. Our plastics, cardboards, even though we said we were recycling, I found that we were going into the landfill. I couldn't understand why that was happening, and started looking into things and was being told by previous managers and employees that it's just not efficient enough for us to do. And I started looking into numbers, and I found that we were spending $10,000, $20,000 a year to get rid of this stuff. So I started doing some research, talked with Bonnie, and we decided to implement the program. I went to the selectmen. We were able to get the okay to do that. We bought a baler. And with that baler, we're probably turning around $50,000 a year now. So it's working to the point where people who have said it isn't going to work have come back to me and said, well, you were right. Some of the things that we started was baling our cardboard, but we're going to get into plastic. So the plastics, we're just doing 1 to 7 because of manpower. We were only 3 guys and a part-timer, and we just don't have the manpower to stand there and help people separating their plastic. We have them throw it to a bin, and then every Thursday we're making 2 to 3 bales of plastic, 1 through 7. My guys will go through and separate what doesn't belong in there. People are getting much better at it. So this is probably going to be a very short thing, but let me see. Well, 2019, we disposed of 56 tons of plastic. A lot of plastic for a small community, and it's getting more. We're probably going to come close to doubling that this year, probably due to the pandemic, but probably due to the fact that people are more excited about recycling. I think more people are getting into the recycling as we get into it. And on top of that, they see the savings. You know, it's their tax dollars. But some of the other things I wanted to go over was Bonnie. Bonnie has been a great help with this. And I would suggest anybody who's looking into doing any of this type of thing, get in touch with Bonnie, because there's just so much information out there saying that, you know, recycling the plastic isn't worth it, which is just not true. The more articles I'm reading, I think it's going to become more and more prevalent in our society that we're going to be recycling plastic. I'm seeing things from making tires with it to, I think a test right now is being done up in California about using the plastics in a asphalt for the roads as a binder. I think that our government is going to probably get involved and start making it mandatory for some of these companies to start using recycled plastic. We've got to find a place for it with all these landfills closing and the cost of landfills and the cost of transfer stations and things like that, getting rid of the waste. We're running out of space for it. This is our baler that we put in. Right now it's just showing cardboard, but people just throw it in there. It was tough at the beginning because getting them to throw the right things in. It took about 6 months to get people doing the right thing, and pretty much they're doing that now. We get an occasional where we're a community that has a lot of vacationers, so we have to keep an eye on that because we'll see them throwing the cardboard in there with the styrofoam in it and things like that, which is not going to work for us. But it's tough because there's a picture of our baler right there. At one time, what we had was the old screw type compactor. And in that compactor, we were maybe getting 2 to 4 ton into a 40-yard container. It was not a very well working machine. And then we'd have to have that shipped out. And we were paying $220 per truck to haul it down to Waste Management. So that right there was a huge savings because we're not paying to have it shipped by 2 or 3 tons. Now we're shipping out tractor trailer loads. And by the time it's done, we're still making a small profit on the plastic. But the big savings is what we're saving for it not to go into the landfill, both financially and, you know, for our community. What am I looking at here? Oh, that's the bin where they just drop the plastic in. It goes down a chute. And every Thursday, when we're closed, but my guys are in, we separate the plastic. You know, we'll go through it and take the stuff out that we don't want in there, and then we bale it. The baler has made a huge difference in being able to hold on to these commodities until the market is there. You know, we have aluminum, for instance. You know, I'm just pushing a baler because I think it's a great idea. The aluminum, we're able to hold on to and double the price of what we're getting by holding on to it until the price is right. I will say that 95% of the community is on board with this, and a good portion of them demand it. So I think it's something that we're going to be seeing in the future. I think it's only going to become better organized. I think that we've got technology. I think everything's just getting better. And this is what I felt 2 years ago when I took over, when I was told, no, it's not going to work. We're making all kinds of changes here for recycling. We'll continue to make the changes, and it looks like things are going to continue on the upswing for us. When I can go to the town and say, look, we saved $50,000 off our budget this year because we're recycling this. That's a huge selling point, to the point where I've said, look, you know, I want to buy a truck. And they said, yeah, go ahead, do it. And we're saving another $80,000 on that. So it's just it's something that we really need to do. I was never considered a tree hugger growing up and in all my time, and until I came here, I had no idea what was involved with this and how important it is to do the recycling on all aspects of it. I don't know how much more. Like I said, if anybody's interested in doing this, I would definitely contact Bonnie. She's got a wealth of information and has helped us so much that people think I know what I'm doing, and it doesn't take a rocket scientist to do this. It takes a little bit of work, takes a little added work for my guys, but they've all come on board with it. They've all come on board with it. They've seen it working, and we're seeing just huge results from this. I will say that I'm really, really happy that I was able to do this. That's it. Short. My baler was a used baler. This is the old screw type one, but our baler was a used baler, but it's a big baler. We got it for $40,000 install. That paid for itself in the first year. It's paid off. And the variety of materials I'm putting in there are aluminum, plastic, cardboard. I'm going to attempt copper. I don't know how well that's going to work, but I'm going to attempt it because I was told it could do it. And steel cans, but steel cans are a little bit of an issue because they don't, to bale it, they don't come back. They crush and they stay that way. And we have trouble with keeping those bales together, but we're working on that. It's paid itself tenfold by the time all said and done, and I think it's something that.
You have about a minute, Joe.
Okay, I think it's something that's going to keep us. We're set up now for the future, I believe, to the point where I want to buy another bale. We're set up for the future when everything changes, and we're not hit with, okay, we've got to make wholesale changes right now. And that's about all I have to say. I'll let the experts get into the other stuff and the people with more experience. Thanks a lot.
Very good, Joe. I think it shows that new eyes on an old situation can be an advantage, just to see how things have been done and what can be done. And I think you're good proof of that. So thank you very much.
I agree. It was pretty hard to change old ways, but by doing it, even the people who said no are on board. Thank you.
No, you're welcome. Thank you. Okay, next up we have John Edgerly, and John is the operations supervisor at BCEP Solid Waste District in Pittsfield, New Hampshire. Go ahead, John.
Good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to BCEP, and we are a well-established recycling facility. I believe this building was built in 1997 or thereabouts. I have been here for 5 years, but worked previously up in Bartlett and Jackson, starting in 2003, where I established a recycling program up there. We are a 4-town cooperative that is made up of Farnstead, Chichester, Epsom, and Pittsfield. And I'm basically going to tell you what we do with our plastics today. We do number 1s and number 2s. And we originally did 1 through 7, but found we had a hard time getting rid of them. And when we changed to the 1s and 2s, much easier to market them, and the profits were triple what we were getting before. The next slide, please. We have signage directing the people where and what things are. The next sign. Next slide, please. So we have number 1, and we give the description of what we're looking for. Next slide. Number 2, natural, again, what we're looking for. And next slide is our number 2, colored. Currently with the number 2 colored, we are separating it out, but not recycling it due to contamination. And on to the next slide. This shows our bunker with a collection of the number 1. Next slide, please. The natural, again, in the bunker. And next slide is the colored. And if you look at that, you can see it is definitely contaminated. Next slide. We put the material into bunkers, have the customers pre-sort at home, hopefully, and sort them accordingly. Then we start within the bunkers with baskets. We have baskets made up that are approximately 300 cubic feet each. They are 5 foot wide, 10 foot long, and 6 foot high. And in order to get the volume of material that we need to make the bales, we use these in the bunkers first, fill them up, and then move them out. And as you can see on the right-hand side of the picture is the peat that is just in the bunker without a basket. The other materials are in baskets. Next slide, please. And this is just a quick shot of what our baskets look like. And next shot. From here, we put them in the baskets. The baskets are then dumped into our sorting hopper. From here, they are mediated through a series of lights and switches up to the sort belt. Next slide. And then quickly to the next slide. This is our sort belt. We do a negative sort here at BCEP, meaning we get rid of what we don't want and we keep what we want. As it goes through the process, it has a foot pedal and hand control operations. It goes by the sorter. Usually one person is sorting, and they pick out and throw away what is undesirable in the bale. Next slide. Our finished product in a peat bale. And I think we got one more left. And our finished product in a natural. Now, we have found in doing this, we've been doing the 1s and 2s for almost 3 years now. And in order to get our bale weights that we want to make the material more marketable,
About 1 minute.
we have the pits, which are approximately 20 feet long and hold about 800 cubic feet. So we have found that with natural, we need roughly 2,000 cubic feet of material, the peat 800 cubic feet of material. And that's why we use a combination of baskets and the hoppers to make up all of our material. And again, the colored, we are currently not baling that because contamination levels are just so high and we don't have enough room to store enough raw material to make a bale. So those who are getting into the baling process, what I wanted to emphasize with this presentation is the amount of space that you need to store the raw materials to make the bales. And we're averaging 1,100 pounds for our peat and 1,200 to 1,400 pounds for our natural. And I will take questions after our third presentation.
Thank you, John. That was very good. There are some questions coming in, which we'll get to in the end. And I know some of you have answered them already online, but we'll probably ask them out loud for everybody's benefit when we get to the end. Next up, we have Aideen Quinn, who is the Director of Business Development and Procurement at EFS Plastics in Listowel. Is that correct? Ontario, Canada, and Hazleton, Pennsylvania.
Great,
Aideen?
thank you very much. Okay, so yeah, I loved hearing those presentations from John and Joe. And just before I get into my presentation, just wanted to provide the context of John and Joe's facilities are, collecting the material from the municipalities, doing the sorting, our operation is different. We are an end market. So EFS Plastics is a company that would be an end market for operations like John and Joe's. So today, yeah, I want to talk to you about the Goldilocks bales. I already sent out emails to Joe and John. I want to talk to them about how to make some Goldilocks bales for us. But yeah, I'm very excited to be talking to this group today. The Northeast region is absolutely one that we'd like to focus on, you know, be getting as much as we can from that area. So just, okay. So just a little bit about me before I get into what I'm looking for. I started off studying biology, and I was very interested in doing things that would be good for the environment. In that left picture, I'm in a mangrove forest in Panama, very far away from any civilization. And in that forest, there was tons of plastic floating around. I saw like a little doll, I saw bottles, and that kind of triggered for me an interest in trying to reduce waste and find ways to reuse materials before they end up in the natural environment. I worked at two MRFs, two large recycling facilities, one in Brooklyn, New York, and one in Toronto, Canada. And that's where I got exposed to how the material is collected, how it's sorted. And at both of those facilities, we were selling to EFS Plastics. So that's how I was introduced to the company I currently work for, where today on the right picture, you can see that's the type of material we're looking for, primarily the 3 through 7 plastic stream. So EFS Plastics is processing about 45,000 metric tons of plastic per year. And yeah, we're producing HDP, LDP, polypropylene pellets. And in any given month, you know, it's about 45 different specific products that are going out to market. Like Marc mentioned, we have two facilities, one in Ontario, Canada, Southern Ontario, and one in Northeastern Pennsylvania. The Ontario facility does the 3 through 7 mixed plastics. We also do film there. The Hazleton, Pennsylvania facility does pretty much entirely film, and also some HD that is going into film applications. Our recycling process is fully automated, so we don't have any hand sorters on the line. We do need the specifications. There's certain things that we really can't have in the stream because we don't have anyone hand sorting through it. So especially from the Northeast region, we have trouble with things like if there's thick cardboard end caps. In other facilities, they might have someone who could physically remove that. For us, that's something that's going to have to go through our shredder and go through our wash process. That thick paper is going to cause problems for us. So yeah, that's just something that's a little bit unique to us, that we don't have anyone touching it. It's all going through an automated process. So like I mentioned before, we are bringing in materials to feed our two separate lines. So we have our film lines, and then we have our rigid plastic lines. The film that we're bringing in is coming from curbside collected film, also from store take back programs. So one's maybe at like a Walmart where you can bring back your film, they collect it, they bale it. That's a stream that we use as well. And then on the rigid plastic side, we're buying 3 through 7 mixed plastic, straight polypropylene bales, or straight HDPE bales. Now in that 3 through 7 mix, we're looking for the polyethylene and the polypropylene. So the HDP, the LDP, and the polypropylene. We're not recovering polystyrene or PVC. So the 3 through 7 is a really bad name. We're really looking for polypropylene and polyethylene, not all those kind of random types of materials that could be in there. And our end product is these pellets. So we, a big part of our operation is producing custom compounded pellets. So it might be adding different color additives, adding certain, maybe a heat strength or a flexibility compound that would make it better for a certain application. And these are just a few samplings of products that might actually use our pellets to be made. So corrugated pipe is a big one, garbage bags, reusable grocery bags. In California, they require the use of post-consumer resin, so that's a big end market for us. Okay, so as I mentioned before, we're looking for these Goldilocks bales. For our process, we've invested a lot in the equipment. We, again, a fully automated system. we don't need the bales to be perfect. Some people are really pushing for very, very pure polypropylene. They're willing to pay a lot more to get the very clean stuff. That's really not how we're set up. We are anticipating quite a bit of contamination to be in there, and we have very efficient ways to remove that contamination. So we don't need it to be perfect, but we don't want the residue from a MRF. We do need things, especially like batteries, tanglers. We need that to be removed. And it is kind of, it's surprisingly hard to find that middle ground. There's more and more facilities that are installing an optical to remove that, just the polypropylene, for example. And there's still a lot of facilities that produce a bale that they call 3 through 7 that truly is just the residue coming out of the MRF. But we are, in any given month, we're buying about 100 different truckloads of 3 through 7 in North America. So there is a lot of 3 through 7 out there that we have access to, but we are looking for more. And there's a lot of different ways for MRFs to make that meet our needs. So I'd be very happy to talk to anyone individually about which pathway makes sense for your facility, but there's certain things that you could consider. I mean, some municipalities we work with, their goal is to reduce the amount going to landfill as their primary goal. They really want to divert as much as they can. So we might be accepting from them a bale that has a little bit more contamination, but maybe we're geographically kind of close. It makes sense for us to do that sorting rather than for them to try to sort everything out perfectly. And in other facilities, maybe it's coming from the West Coast. It really doesn't make sense to ship a lot of waste all the way across the country. So we ask them to clean it up a bit more. Now, externally, there's a lot of things that are influencing the decisions we're making as a company. So on the supply side, we see things like, well, especially talking about 3 through 7, you may have heard that the how to recycle label. So there's that image on the bottom right that you might have seen on packaging. Previously, if something was a polypropylene number 5, it would say widely recyclable. But just last year, that was changed to now check locally. And that's difficult for us. We're looking for more polypropylene. And now the public might be receiving the message that their yogurt cups, they should be landfilling them. And even if your community is encouraging people to recycle yogurt cups, they might just be looking at the label and disposing of it. So, you know, there are valid reasons they didn't do it randomly, but from our perspective, we're really eager to see that label change. We want as much polypropylene as we can get. Another thing, we're seeing a lot of states in the US that are looking at extended producer responsibility programs. We're excited about that because we think a little bit of extra funding going into the system will help keep more material in circulation, will increase diversion rates. So we are looking forward to that happening. Also on the supply side, yeah, we're seeing more and more attention given to chemical recyclers, which could potentially drain some of the feedstock that we're looking for, might be going off to chemical recyclers, and none of them are yet operating at industrial scale. So we're concerned that feedstock might go to chemical recyclers for a couple of years. Who knows what's going to happen to them? It would deplete the amount that we had available to us. On the demand side, so right now, if you're selling plastic, you are getting good prices for your plastic right now. The prices of polyethylene and polypropylene are high. Unfortunately, that does not seem to be driven by the demand for specifically post-consumer material. It seems to be driven by the price of virgin plastic having increased. And that's because of things like in Texas, where there was the winter storm that caused all these outages where they produced the plastic. Because those facilities shut down for a while, it created a lack of supply, and people are now willing to pay more for recycled plastic because they can't get their hands on the virgin material. So when production goes fully back up to speed again on the virgin plastic side, we do anticipate that the price of the post-consumer plastic will decline again. So yeah, prices are good right now, but we don't think that's going to be a lasting state. On the other hand, we're seeing things like the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, that all these companies have committed to 25% post-consumer resin in their packaging by 2025. That's very important. And also legislation that could require the use of post-consumer resin. Washington just passed a bill that requires post-consumer resin. New Jersey has a very exciting bill that I think this month they're going to be talking about again, that would require PCR in products. And I'll just leave you with one thing that I hear talked about a lot. The large brands, so Coca-Cola, Unilever, often they're talking about, is there enough supply to meet their demand for post-consumer resin? But often they're talking about, is there enough clear food grade material so that they can make packaging out of it? And in terms of that question, no, there's not enough clear food grade resin to make packaging out of. But from my perspective, is there the right demand to meet the supply? So the supply today from households is colored and it's not food grade. So what are we going to do with all this material that currently is collected that we would like to see recycled if the end market demand doesn't match what is currently available? So I don't have the answer, but I think that's the question that needs to be posed, and we all need to be thinking about, how do we connect these two problems? The supply and demand aren't necessarily, the bridge isn't quite there. But I think if everyone's thinking about this particular problem of how to connect these dots, we might be able to solve it soon. Okay, so yes, if anyone is producing a 3 through 7, a 1 through 7, a polypropylene, I'd be very interested in seeing pictures, HDPE as well. So please send me an email. I'd be very happy to talk more.
All right, great. Thank you, Aideen. One thing I need to mention for everyone out there is that EFS is a new NRRA vendor. So if you're excited about what you just heard and interested in doing business with EFS, then contact Bonnie Bethune at the NRRA and she'll take care of you. We do have some questions coming in, and as I noted, some of you have been answering them online, but we'll go over them again. And let's see here. Let me go back here. I did write some things down as we were going through here. Joe, the question that you asked, that you answered online, I believe actually you answered it during your presentation, but I think I'll ask it again, was about the cost of your baler. Where is Joe?
I'm right here.
Okay.
The cost,
Go ahead.
like I said, we bought a used baler and it was about 40,000, but like I said, it's a pretty good sized baler. That's, you know, that was to have them come and install it and everything for us, a new hopper, everything, not just the baler. So we spent about 40,000 on it.
Okay. And you can bale you can bale everything that you have, that you take in there, right? Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, you show the cardboard, you show the. Yep. And is it a 3-phase?
Yeah, we look. I believe it is.
Yeah.
And
Good.
we don't use cardboard with our plastic, and we've had really no trouble with it. It stays together pretty nicely.
And another question that was asked, and you know, Joe or John, maybe you can, either one of you can answer this, was about additional labor costs for separating out the contaminants. Do you have issues with that?
I don't, because like I said, we're in on Thursday anyway, so we're getting paid to do whatever has to be done there. So is there a cost? Yeah, the guys are actually putting in labor doing it, but we're here already. So if we weren't doing that, we'd just be doing something else. So, you know, is there a labor cost? Yes, but we've managed to put it into our whole program on the time we're there.
Yeah, and I think, John, you mentioned that you do your baling on the days that you're closed to the public. Is that right?
We do, yes.
Oh, okay.
Except
We
for the
bail as it comes in.
cardboard's baled during the day as we're going, but
Yeah,
the plastic and the aluminum we do on Thursday.
and John?
We bail as it comes in. We pretty much have a staff person that is dedicated to operating the baler all the time, every day of the week that we are open, which is Tuesday through Saturday. And it's built into our budget. We've done a cost analysis, and based upon what we bring in for revenue, it pays for the employee to operate that process.
Good. Aideen, a couple of things that we have for you in particular. That one question that I have is, can you explain what Goldilocks bales are?
Yeah, so just the idea that it doesn't need to be perfect. We also don't want it to be residue. The 3 through 7 that we're looking for is somewhere in between. So we want it to be 50% polyethylene and polypropylene. We can have quite a bit of contamination in there, polystyrene, PET, be paper. It could be some random things that just kind of end up in the MRF, but we do need about that 50% of recoverable material. So, and the most common way that is made is if a MRF has a way to sort out its ones, a way to sort out its twos, then we would want all other plastic to be included in a bale. So it could be, that could be the message given to the workers: pick out anything that's plastic once the ones and twos have been removed.
And then a couple of people have asked about caps. Are you guys removing caps at your facility, or are they acceptable to you? Aideen, how do caps play into all of this?
Yeah, and I think I saw someone say caps are normally number 5, so should that be taken out of the number 2 stream? So the message on caps as an industry message is leave the caps on. Any of the end markets for PET and HDP, they're very, very well set up to handle the PP caps. So you can leave the caps on the bottles. For us, everything in the 3 through 7 bale, its first step is going to go into a shredder. So everything's going to get broken up into flake sizes, about like 1 centimeter flake sizes. So caps will be broken up as well. And then we sort just on the type of plastic. So it doesn't matter if it's a cap or if it's a bottle, it's all going to be just little flakes of plastic, and we will sort it from there. So caps are great. Throw them in. If you want to take them off the bottle and give them to us, that sounds good to me too.
All right. A couple of people, I guess, have asked, I don't know if Heather, if you can put up the slide again for Aideen's contact information. If you can, that'd be nice.
I will share to Aideen again.
Okay.
Do you have your contact information up?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, and certainly if anyone just wants to talk through what you're currently making, you know, sometimes it could be a very simple change that would make it a good product for us. Sometimes it's more extensive, but I would be very happy to have that conversation.
Another one I have here, it's how large does a facility need to be to make cost effective to invest in a sorting conveyor belt rather than having transfer station staff remove contamination by wading through the pile?
Tough question.
In other words, I guess, Aideen, are you removing the contaminants, or?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot that goes into that question of when does it become worth it to do the sorting? I mean, I think probably Joe would probably have a better influence on something like that type of small scale. But I guess I'll just share that we're purchasing material from some facilities that are, you know, hand sorted depots, and they rely on the residents to sort the material out, and then maybe once every 6 months they have enough to bale up and send to us. And we also take split loads, so we could take a load of partially HDPE, partially 3 through 7, partially film, and we provide different pricing for each type of bale. And yeah, so from our end, we work with fairly small operations, and sometimes we even do 2 stops. So we might pick up from one facility and then pick up from a second one on the same truck. There's lots of options.
And I think with your response to the Goldilocks bales, the question about colored plastics being mixed, I know I saw it here somewhere, that's okay.
For our process, absolutely. Yeah, we're looking for mixed colors. We will extract the lighter colors will go into certain products, the darker colors will go into others. But that's, not a problem. If you have a bale that's all black, that might change our pricing a little bit, just because we'll have to use it for certain products, but we are interested in that. So yeah, even if it's all black, we would be interested.
Well, it says for all speakers, what size are the communities you serve and work with? Joe?
Well, we're a lakes community, so we can go from 8,000 people in the winter to 25,000 people in the summer. Although this year it's been pretty steady. I'd say we're on the high end of that with the pandemic and people working remotely. They've stayed up here more of the year, and we're seeing that in the summertime. It's usually crazy here, and it's been that way all year long. Last year we were about 600 tons more than the year before, and this year we're 200 tons over where we were last year at this time. So it's definitely increasing.
John?
I haven't been here long enough to know the populations numbers. We're a fairly well-established operation, so I would say well over 10,000. And again, we are also part of a lakes community with a tourism and population surge in the summertime. So I'd have to get back on you with the exact numbers of how many people we serve. And to add to the question of the cost of putting in a sort belt, again, it was well established. Community by community, I feel you'd have to look at what your cost is of building it, putting it in, and what you have potential for your revenue and the amount of product that you're going to process.
Okay. I just have a question on that, because both of you being touristic communities, that's certainly something that I had a lot of experience with working in Hampton. What do you see as the difference between your year-round residents and your summer seasonal residents as far as compliance to your rules and regulations?
I find that our seasonal are less compliant, much less compliant. They are usually in a hurry. They don't want to be there, and they'll just do what they want to do. So you definitely have to keep an eye on it. Whereas the full-time residents here, it's their tax money again, and it makes a difference to them.
Mm-hmm. John, how about you?
A little bird just spoke to me. We have approximately 16,000 residents in our service. It's pretty mixed between compliance. We do have an option for our people that do not want to sort, where they can scale in and they pay 10 cents a pound, and we put that in a separate container, which later gets dumped into our compactors. So compliance it varies, and that's how we deal with the mandatory recycling that we have in town, is in the 4 towns, is by having that option, and that becomes a revenue source for us.
Because my follow-up question to that, which was really my original question that I thought about, was I noticed your signs, and we all try to put signs in to make recycling easier for the residents that come into the facilities. How much are signs worth versus one-on-one, face-to-face? This is how things work here.
I personally believe signs help a little, but if somebody doesn't want to comply, they're not going to comply. One-on-one absolutely makes a difference because signs can say something, but when you explain it to people, it's much more easier for them to understand.
John?
We use the combination of the both, and I prefer the one-on-one. We place a person as much as we can on the upper sorting floor so that they have that one-on-one contact. Our signs are actually, some of them are on the opposite wall of where they're putting the product, so they get missed. And we've also gone, and I didn't get a good picture of it, we have examples of what we want on wires hung above each bin. And we try to direct people to look up, not down, because we don't want them to follow the other people's mistakes. But in person, actually, and explaining it works a lot better.
Great. Back to the questions in the chat box. Are there fewer toxic emissions from MRF sourced pellets, I'm sorry, are there compared to pellets produced from virgin plastic?
So if they're talking in terms of like greenhouse gas emissions, Association of Plastic Recyclers did a study, I think it was 2 years ago, and they actually quantified the GHG emission reduction by using PCR instead of virgin plastic. And it depends based on the type of plastic resin, but on average, it was about a 75% reduction in GHG emissions if you were to use post-consumer resin instead of virgin plastic. So that's a pretty big reduction. Yeah, and that I can share that report with the group later if you're interested.
Is the recycling rate of plastic still 9% of all plastics recycled?
So I'm glad someone asked this because I think it's misinterpreted by a lot of people. So I think when most people hear only 9% of plastic is recycled, they immediately think of the plastic that they interact with. They think only 9% of what you put into your recycling bin is recycled. And that's not true. That 9% number is of all plastic that's produced in North America. That includes medical waste, car components, sunglasses. Of all that plastic, only 9% is recycled. That's awful, but it's not the same of only 9% of what you put in your recycling bin. I'd say of what you put in your recycling bin at the MRF, probably 85% of that plastic is captured. When we receive plastic from a MRF, depending on the commodity, it could be 95% of it is captured. It could be quite a bit less, but sometimes what's not captured is things like a stuffed animal. A stuffed animal is plastic. It's a nylon polyester plastic, but there's not a good way to recycle that today. So I wouldn't get overly concerned with that specific 9% number. Just the takeaway, of course, is that there is way too much plastic entering the natural environment, and we need to get more creative.
Along with that, what do you do with the plastics that come with no recycling symbol on them at all?
So, I mean, likely that's not a recyclable plastic. Really, the only plastic that we can recycle, it's typically plastic packaging. If it has no label on it, I mean, that's probably a plastic product. It could be an acrylic, it could be anything. There's thousands of types of plastic, and that is going to be a residue stream. So that's going to end up in a landfill or incinerator, or potentially, a waste to energy fuel type situation.
Okay. don't see anything else here. Oh, let's see. If you could maybe address the issue of source reduction and for limited contamination.
So maybe the issue of just how do we get people to produce
Yes,
less waste?
yes.
Need for source reduction of plastic versus,
Yeah.
I mean, that is not the question that I think about on a daily basis, but that is a very important question for someone to be thinking about. And I mean, there's all kinds of opportunities. A lot of the big brands are thinking about rethinking packaging. So they're thinking about refill stations. They're thinking about like Starbucks is thinking about giving out reusable cups and having a collection system for the reusable cups. There's so much that could be done there, but that really requires a lot of out of the box thinking, which I think the brands are starting to do, but it needs the consumer push. We are here to recycle the material once it has reached the end of life, but yeah, absolutely, we need to extend the life and really get away from those single-use plastics.
And that gets to yesterday's conversation with Marc Morgan about the reusable, refillable containers that he worked with his local, the co-op food store and other commercial businesses in the area of Lebanon where he works, that people could bring in their reusable cups and have them filled. And then there was the cup swap program where you bring in your cup and you get another one that's clean, and you can continue on that basis. Two things that he was doing up there, which is kind of nice. So nice to tie those two things together. Another question we have is, how do single stream facilities it changed on me right here. So how do single stream facilities do as far as the purity, limited contamination in the products that they supply?
I would say there's huge variation, and it comes down to maybe how the contract is set up and what the landfill fees are like in that area. So we deal with some, facilities that get a lot of contamination in the door, but maybe they're in an area that landfill rates are really high. So they're gonna do everything they can to recover as much as they can, make sure they don't get any rejects, make some really good quality bales. Let's say that municipality or that MRF operator gets all of the marketing revenue, then they're gonna make the highest quality bales they can. And then we deal with some that maybe all of the marketing revenue goes to the municipality instead of the operator, and they don't really care about making as much money as they can, then they might not care so much about quality.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think single stream is necessarily linked to better or worse quality in terms of the plastics we're seeing. It's more how the contracts are set up and who has the incentive to make the best quality bale possible.
Mm-hmm. Are there any agricultural plastics that are recyclable? Greenhouse film, hay bale covers, row cover, and plastic mulch?
That's not something that our company does today. There is a company, Revolution Plastics. They do a lot of agricultural film. They do a terrific job. So yes, it's recyclable, not something that our company is looking for.
Mm-hmm. I know, not that it's agricultural, but I know when I was working in Hampton, there was a company that was recycling the plastic covers over, the seasonal plastic covers over boats. And I know that the people in the harbor areas of Seacoast, New Hampshire were much more familiar with that than I was. But I always sent people down to the, hang on. I thought I turned my phone off. I I sent people down to the harbor master to get that information on a regular basis. And I know they were still doing it when I left in 2017, but I don't know whether they're doing it now. So I guess there is an outlet, just depends upon where you find it. Let's see, another question for Joe and John. If you could make one change in your plastics recycling program, what would that be?
Wow. I think it would probably be the education side of it. I think people are so misinformed about what's going on with plastic recycling that the mixed messages out there. So you've got some people who say, like you said, only 9% is recycled. So they're saying, well, why bother? And I think it's education.
And John, I noticed that you had an answer to the agricultural. You want to share that?
We do receive it here at our facility, but the stuff that I see come in is absolutely filthy. And so it goes straight to the trash. It's full of dirt, mud, manure, and everything. So it's not even, to clean it up enough to get it recyclable would not be worth it. Not much I would change with our facility. It's very well run and our operations go fairly smooth. I do want to comment on the caps that someone was asking about over the sort belt. We prefer the caps stay on. If they are off, they just fall out of the bale. They don't stay in the bale. So there's no way to get them really to market without scooping them all up and eventually putting them into a Gaylord and sending them that way. So we prefer the caps stay on.
As do we, because the caps get down inside the little channels in our baler. So then you try to feed a wire through it. It's just, so with the caps on, it saves us a lot of aggravation.
Okay. Do you find that to be the case, that 18 is that with the caps on, that's a better way to go?
Yep. Yeah, it's absolutely the industry standard is leave caps on.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's see here. Anybody have any ideas of how the NRRA could help communities assist with educating your residents about recycling plastics with accurate information?
I think one thing I might want the NRA to do is create, maybe to get the members to produce the same type of commodities. One of the issues we're seeing in the Northeast is some communities use cardboard end caps. Some make 1 through 7, some make 3 through 7, and it's really kind of a mixed bale. Other parts of North America, there are more kind of consistent products being made. And I think that's partially because there's so many end markets in the Northeast, and it's the place that a lot of brokers would go to maybe find material that they could export. But I think now with the export markets gone, and there just being kind of a handful of domestic markets looking for plastic, especially on the 3 through 7 or polypropylene tubs and lid side, there probably could be a little bit more uniformity in the products that are being made and making them more to the industry specifications. That would help in us working with new sources. Today, we have to go through a lot of trial and error when we get new suppliers in the Northeast, something we're very willing to do, but yeah, something just to kind of bring everyone, create some more harmonization, that would be very helpful.
Okay. I think we have time for one more question here. Would EFS accept the quality of HDPE colored that John's facility produces?
Well, when he showed that picture, I did immediately send John an email saying, I really want to send you quotes on that. It looks pretty good to me. But the contamination I did see in there was PET. So it seemed like there was the PET thermoform was in there. And that's something that reduces the quality. From my perspective, it's not a quality that really hinders the product. It just reduces the overall yield. So that would be reflected in the pricing we would offer. But I think especially with the pricing where it is right now, I hope it can be convincing to John.
We will be
Well,
looking into it.
It's always good to hear where the products go. It's a question that residents often have that I'm sure you two guys hear. What happens to all this? Where does it go? And it's always nice to get to know the people, where the products go and how they handle them and how you get them reprocessed for further use. So I appreciate you all and the time you spent with us today. And I guess, I don't know, Heather, there you are. We're kind of waiting for you to come up first, but I figured I'd do you.
Thank you, Mark and Joe and John and Nadine, for those wonderful presentations. It's really great to have a conversation between, having our, facility operators talk about their particular programs and having one of our many vendors looking at that end product and, what's happening in the market right now with that material. So thank you. So we'll now be taking another 10-minute break. So feel free to stretch your legs or get a snack. We are going to return at 10, well, actually it'll be 15, so 10:40 a.m. for an overview of our glass recycling program at NRRA. All right, thank you. See you at 10:40.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm just making sure that I have got my screen up that I'd like to share with you because we're going to talk a little bit about glass recycling. All right, great. You should be able to see what I'm looking at on the website now. So welcome back, everyone. As many of you know, finding outlets for recycling glass has been a challenge for municipalities in the Northeast for quite a bit of time. And we have been working with our members and vendors to develop 2 successful glass recycling programs in recent years. And in particular, we want to make sure that glass can be recycled rather than landfilled. And Bonnie shared some information about that earlier. And at a time when there is plenty of negative news about glass recycling, we created an educational resource to make sure that we can provide communities and residents with transparent information about what happens with glass that is recycled through NRRA. And I'd like to share that with you today. And speaking of glass recycling, the Glass Packaging Institute, our conference platinum sponsor, shares our goal of increasing glass recycling and keeping glass out of landfills. And we're glad to have Scott DeFife, president of GPI, in attendance today. So at this time, over 100 municipalities who are members of NRRA in New Hampshire, Vermont, and Massachusetts are recycling glass for over 500,000 residents into new glass bottles, jars, fiberglass insulation, and glass aggregate. And what we wanted to do was create a way to share that information with our members and with the public. And so we created an ArcGIS story map, which is a platform that allows users to create immersive stories that share text, interactive maps, videos, and photos. And so I'd like to give you all a tour of our glass recycling story map now, which you're welcome to share with your communities as an example of recycling with results when it comes to glass. Now, this can be found on the resource library of our website, which I showed yesterday. And if you open up the story map into its full view, this is what it looks like. And as a reminder, our website's at nrrarecycles.org. So as you progress through the story map, we have some information about why it's important to recycle glass and talking about our programs. And we generally talk about our glass recycling in terms of 2 major programs. One in which communities can recycle their glass bottles and jars into fiberglass insulation and more recently into new glass bottles and jars. And then the second is our processed glass aggregate program, where we're crushing glass into an aggregate that can then be used in road and infrastructure projects in the place of gravel. And so what this map shows is it gives an overview of the over 100 communities that are participating in our program. And the communities shown in blue are the ones whose glass is being turned into fiberglass insulation and new glass bottles and jars. And the ones that are shown in green are having their glass crushed into an aggregate. And then we also show the 7 consolidation sites where communities are delivering their glass before they're further processed through these programs. And so the colors here indicate which communities are delivering to which of our host sites. And you can explore this map by clicking on it. So for example, if you click on this circle here, we can see that the city of Keene is a host site for our program for fiberglass and new glass bottles and jars. And it's serving a population of over 177,000 people. So this is a nice way to be able to explore. And if your community doesn't participate, you know, you can also see that as well here. And just as a further clarification about how our consolidation programs work, you can see in this case that we have about 27 communities who are all delivering glass to the city of Keene, which is then weighing, inspecting, and storing that glass until it's shipped to another market. So our glass that is collected for fiberglass insulation and now more recently into new glass bottles and jars is going through our vendor in Canada, 2M Resources. And so this just takes you through, shows you a photo of each of our host sites. The city of Lebanon is also a host site for this program, as well as All Metals Recycling in Hardwick, Vermont. And then ultimately the glass is being taken to 2M Resources in Canada to be further processed. And then our other program that we have is our processed glass aggregate program. And again, we have consolidation sites where communities can bring their glass. And in New Hampshire, they are also able to include things like Pyrex, ceramics, porcelain, other glass-like items that can be difficult for residents to keep out of their glass. And then in Massachusetts, it can only be glass bottles and jars, and that's just based on the regulations in Massachusetts. And then once the site has about 1,000 tons of glass on site, we work with another vendor to crush the material into an aggregate. We actually have a great video that talks more about that process that I'd encourage people to check out afterwards. And here you can see our consolidation sites for glass for our processed glass aggregate program. We have the town of Littleton, New Hampshire. We have the town of New London, New Hampshire. And we have the waste management turnkey facility in Rochester. And then, as I mentioned, the town of Dennis, Massachusetts on the Cape is a little bit different in that they can only take glass bottles and jars and not include those other glass-like items. And then lastly, there's a map here that just shows circles that indicate the populations that are served by the different communities that participate, as well as the consolidation sites, just to give you a visual of who's being served through this program. And if there's any questions about that, I'm happy to, answer a few of those now, but also we will be hearing from Francois Irfino of 2M Resources in our next session. And so there'll be an opportunity to talk a bit more about glass recycling there. Well, not seeing any questions coming through, I would say it is now time for our next session, which is understanding end markets, what happens with your recycling. Our moderator will be Roger Gazowski. He is the contract and procurement manager at the Connecticut Resources Recovery Authority and an NRRA board member. Thank you for joining us, Roger.
Reagan, welcome everyone. As this is a webinar, We'll dispense with the usual formalities. I'm assuming everyone knows where the restroom and the emergency exit is, wherever you're watching this from. So with that, let me get straight to the introductions. We've got a great panel of speakers today. Talking about metals, we have Ira Gross, the manager of regional accounts for Schnitzer Northeast. For paper, we have Dave Cameron, the general manager of OPR Systems in Wilmington, Mass. And for glass, we have Francois Arfino, manager of strategic purchasing, sourcing, and sales from 2M Resources in Quebec, Canada. For anyone that hasn't been through this, we are going to give each speaker about 10 minutes, and we ask that you hold questions till the end or ask them in the chat, and we'll get to questions after each speaker speaks. So with that, Ira, why don't we go?
All right. Thank you, Roger. Thank you, Reagan and NRRA, for inviting me for the speaking opportunity. Yeah, so I'm just going to go over a high level sort of what happens at Schnitzer and you know, touch on certain market outlets that we have and processing capacities and capabilities that we have within the region. Next slide, please. So this is our yard in Portland, Maine. And there's a couple of different things going on here. So behind that crane is a large pile of light iron. And as many of the members of NRRA are aware, you know, we have a Schnitzer roll-off can there where material is aggregated in that collection vehicle. And then it's transported to mostly Concord, New Hampshire, but sometimes Manchester. But it occurs at all the Schnitzer yards, whether that's in Auburn or Portland, Maine, Attleboro or Worcester, Massachusetts, and at a much larger scale at our terminal in Everett, Mass. But that light iron is, you know, then transformed into bales, which make the transportation more cost effective. And that will go down to our shredding facility in Everett, Massachusetts. I have some additional slides to show what that product looks like. And from there it would be sold off into, you know, the international market via bulk export cargoes. The crane in this picture is actually taking old sheet aluminum, dirty aluminum, and it's transferring it to our non-ferrous shipping hub in Concord via that large dump trailer that you see Schnitzer on the side of. That material, when it gets down to Concord, will be dumped onto a pad. Some employees will work it and make sure that the spec is made in terms of you know, the quality that's expected by our consumer, our customer, and that will be processed in the form of a bale. And then if you look over, you know, the front of the trailer, the cab of the truck, there's a yellow excavator, and he has a mobile shear. He's taking large pieces of steel, which we buy as unprepared number 1 or unprepared P&S, and he is transforming that into prepared spec, which will also be shipped to Everett. And this happens at all of our facilities surrounding our deep water terminal for that material to be loaded for export. Next slide, please. So on the left, we have the light iron that's been transformed into somewhat uniform rectangular shape. It helps us maximize the stowage capacity for our trailers. And then ultimately that's going to go through our shredder in Everett, Mass. The picture on the right is a picture of shredded steel. Has a really nice density, very nice stowage factor. And that will be loaded into large deep water ocean going vessels and shipped around the world and sometimes domestically. But Schnitzer predominantly is an exporter of its steel products. Next slide. So as I had mentioned, the crane in the first picture of the second slide was loading sheet aluminum. This is the baling facility in Concord, New Hampshire. So you can see behind the skid steer, there's some bulk material that's already been sorted, that's been quality checked to a certain extent to where that machine is now going to put it on that infeed conveyor. And then it's going to create bales, which is what we see in the left side of the picture. A lot of mills are shifting towards having a finished package that is baled. A lot of mills are getting away from gaylords for a number of reasons. You know, the change in cardboard, as I'm sure it's been discussed in this conference, and you know, excessive wood pallets, just trying to minimize the amount of waste in the business as a whole. So baling has become a really big part of the non-ferrous operation, and it's something that you know, we have to be mindful of, because we ourselves have had to kind of change how we've handled certain accounts in terms of cardboard generation and wood, in the form of pallets, because of the shift in the markets there. But this is essentially, I would say, 75 to 80% of the non-ferrous that we ship out of Concord is in a baled format or a super sack format. We're trying to really get away from cardboard and pallets. Next slide. So one of the things that we do at Schnitzer is we try and utilize technology. So we have a gun on the left, which is made by Thermo Fisher. It's a Niton analyzer. So this happened to be a picture that I took of a block of titanium. Customer is some ferrotitanium. So when things come in, we have to figure out, what is the specific chemistry? Where can we bring that to market? Based on the chemistry, it can only go to certain homes because not every copper smelter is the same or aluminum shop is the same based on their finished product that they make. So understanding the chemistry has a lot to do with where you can ship an item and also what you can pay for an item and what it's worth. These analyzer guns, they are a little expensive, but the assurance that you get in understanding the composition from a chemistry standpoint of the scrap streams that you have, it pays for itself very quickly. It can help protect you in not paying too much for an alloy that is misrepresented, and it can also help you, upgrade from bulk piles of material that you might buy from time to time as well. So if it's in the budget and it's been a topic of conversation, I would strongly encourage people to utilize a tool like that. On the right, something that Schnitzer's been getting into a lot lately is catalytic converters. We have a very nice program and electronic platform. We do photo grading. We found to be pretty competitive overall in the marketplace and offering transparency to customers, fast and timely payment, and that seems to go a real long way. There's a lot of people out there right now, taking advantage and participating in the run in precious metals. The three major ones being platinum, palladium, and rhodium, which we find in catalytic converters. So, if there's an opportunity for some of these, some of the members to aggregate these units and they'd like to have a representative come out and grade them, be more than happy to set that up and show people how the transparency works and how the grading process works. And it's a great way to get an additional revenue stream in scrap from some of your constituents in your municipalities. Next slide, please. Copper bearing items, as we all know or may know, copper is at an all-time high right now, historically. So some of these items that were kind of slow to move, didn't really have a lot of, we'll say, value per pound, have really exponentially increased as a result of where COMEX is at today. So just a couple of examples, alternators are a great form of scrap, copper bearing, aluminum shell casing, that's an item that we trade quite a bit. You can see the box behind that is well pumps, another great piece of scrap that is very common in our neck of the woods. A lot of folks have well systems that might not be on public water. They're items that constantly need to be replaced or might fail. So another thing that, if you see this in your light iron pile or things that people are bringing in, it might be worth segregating or speaking to your NRRA representative, and we could work together on pricing. Similarly, you have to the right some semi-red brass, which is, it's a flavor of brass that's not quite red brass and a little better than yellow brass, but those are off of boilers. Another very, it's a common item, just another piece of scrap that we deal with on a regular basis in Concord. And next slide. And that concludes my presentation. So, all in all, the commodities market right now is doing quite well. There's a lot of synergy out there with countries coming back online, manufacturing, production coming back online, And as we all know, utilizing scrap to fabricate new ingots or new raw materials has a much smaller carbon footprint than mining things out of the ground. And it's also more cost effective to use scrap. So, you know, Schnitzer, you know, really enjoys the relationship with all the members of the NRRA. And if there's ever an opportunity to, you know, further diversify that relationship, you know, please speak with your NRRA representative, and love to come out and meet people and see if we can do more business together, and open up to any questions.
Actually, NRRA, why don't we hold questions till the end?
I'm sorry.
That's okay. And actually, just to keep this moving, next up we have David Cameron from OPR Systems.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Dave Cameron. I'm with OPR Systems in Wilmington, Mass. We are a paper fiber buyer, processor, and what's known in the business of packer company. In this particular slide, you see our shredding operation, a little bit of material that comes in, sorted office type material, has to be destroyed because of confidential information on there. We provide that service. This is a high grade, which has many uses. As most companies go to electronics within their infrastructure, this is becoming more and more rare in the industry, and it does seem to be a steady demand for it. Final uses are primarily tissue and some reconstituted paper for writing, etc. Next slide. This is how you guys put it together. I mean, it comes in primarily from the offices. They get put in the various types of containers. Here you see hampers in front of us. You see the blue totes in the back. Pretty efficient way, provided you have the space. Some of the smaller facilities struggle with this, but they have good recycling programs and it works out. Next slide, please. Finished product coming out of the baler. They get slid down the machine, and after they are shredded up, they get put into the baling machine, and they come in on this out looking like this. Again, like Ira said, with the metals, much easier to handle, much easier to ship, and it does provide a form of efficiency. Balers are our best friend. Next slide, please. Here, this is the big one right here, OCC. Everybody loves mountains of corrugated. Just some information about corrugated going forward. With the surge of online purchasing, particularly accelerated during the pandemic, the need for corrugated containers is exploding, both domestically and globally. The average use right now is 7 times what it was compared to when it was brick and mortar purchasing only. For example, you have a Target store, they get a box of sweaters in, 50 sweaters, they put them on the shelves. With online retailing, that's 50 separate boxes. Ergo, the need is expanding. They're actually building new facilities within the country, new facilities outside the country, and the demand is there even in these hard times. I am predicting that it's going to go greater, even higher in the future. Next slide, please. Here it goes up the belt, where similar to the metals, it's a similar process. We try to do a final screen, a final grade before we dump it into the hopper and then bale it up. So this purifies the product and reduces claims when it gets overseas, primarily. Next slide, please. Finished product. We all pick up various things. We all know when you get a package from Amazon, that box, it might weigh 16 ounces, maybe 18 ounces, depending on the side, 10 ounces. Each one of these bales is 1,500 pounds. It takes a lot of boxes to make a bale. To make a shipment of 27 tons, even more boxes. The first mountain of containers that you saw loose, well, we'll probably see about 10 of those a day, 15. And it's just a never ending stream, which is good for everybody. I mean, it keeps the stuff off the streets and helps us all out. Next slide, please. This is the big boondoggle right here. This is a photo of the Port of New York 2 weeks ago. As you can see, it seems like it's a bit chaotic. This is what the issue is. Look on the right, those are trucks just trying to get in to get to a destination endpoint. This process now is taking so long and it's become so expensive, primarily lack of drivers. Equipment is always an issue. And it's driving up the expenses. This is really something that can't be hammered enough. We deal with scrap paper. It's not gold, it's not copper, not tin, it's paper, boxes, etc. We're the low people on the list for outgoing product. However, we are a big user of containers. At one point a few years ago, recycled paper was the #2 export in the United States outside of food by container. And that was just a demand. When China pulled out of the market a few years ago, it threw everybody into a tizzy. It threw the market. It caused a lot of consternation, let's put it that way. This is going to be a continuing problem for the near future. Some of the issues are drivers. There aren't enough. It's a graying industry. Young people aren't jumping into it, and you're limited. Combine that with the expenses that are rising, fuel, access, taxes, tolls, etc. People are pulling out of this industry. Until we find a more efficient way of handling at this end of the business, this is going to affect the base pricing more than any other factor. Demand at the pulp mills is exceedingly strong, but shipping right now is the biggest driver in the scrap paper industry on pricing. Next picture, please. Now we're getting to finished products. Here we go. We all eat Cheerios, right? You can find it in your stores. This is what happens with recycled paperboard. Various end uses, box of Cheerios. You can see the labels, and it states how it's handled, whether it's 100% or whatever percentage it is in there. You can feel confident that you're doing your part and keeping the cycle moving. Next photo. We all use this. This actually had a huge increase last year, as we recall. We were kind of shocked. Not only were we shocked, we were scrambling to find it. So those sorted office waste and that sort of stuff, this is where it ends up usually. So let's keep doing that end of it. Next photo, please. Napkins, paper towels, always in use. You know, a lot of folks, oh, let's use cloth, not very efficient. Cloth is probably a little bit more reliable and handy, but this is what we're used to right here. And in our industry, keep using paper. Next photo, please. And this is my favorite right here. This is my end use. I like my beer at the end of the day. Sam Adams happens to be my label right now. And they make a fine chipboard case. So, next photo. And as you can see, here's an example of a shipping carton from the OCC. We order most of our supplies online. I'm sure a lot of you folks do as well. And goes back to my statement about the demand for corrugated. There will never be 100% virgin fiber paper mill come online going forward. There are some that are still grandfathered in, but for the most part, there will always be a demand for a certain amounts of content for corrugated and mixed paper. The corrugated for the top and bottom, the mixed paper is now starting to be used in the fluting in between, which provides not strength, but crush-proof abilities for the cardboard and your package. So when you order that glass and it comes through, not only will it have that bubble wrap, but it usually has a pretty solid box surrounding it as well. Not sure if there's any more slides. No, that's it. This is me. My name is Dave Cameron. I am the general manager at OPR Systems. We operate a 72,000 square foot facility in Wilmington, Mass. And we've been in business since 1989. We've seen the ups and downs, and we like to think that this is an industry that only has a bright future and continue to promote that way. Pretty much what I have to offer at this point.
Perfect. Thanks, David.
You're welcome.
And with that, Francois, if you're ready to go, I know you're rushing and just settling in, so if you need a second, I can filibuster.
You hear me well?
Yes, we can now.
Great. Well, I had a hectic day this morning, to tell you this much. I just got in. So, 2M Resources, based in Quebec, but we opened up a facility through this pandemic. It's about a year. We're operational out of our Hopedale, Massachusetts facility. We're looking to expand a third facility to service the bottle industry. By the way, David, I was at Cascades for about 10 years or so, so I understand the frustrations when the Chinese market shut down and the rest of the markets just practically collapsed around us. That being said, we have also issues when we ship our glass to export markets, and luckily there's a large enough demand in North America so that we don't have to have that difficulties that David and all the other paper guys are going through. So as I said, we opened up a facility in Hopedale, Massachusetts. This COVID has really slowed down our operations, but we're happy to say that the Mass Hydro has finally connected additional power so that we could run 100%. Currently, we're taking the glass that we're receiving from the Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Connecticut, New York areas, and we're semi-processing in Hopedale and providing a finished product out of our Saint Jean operations. I was told this morning that by next week we'll be 100% operational. So all the glass that we're sourcing from our friends at NRRA and all the other locations in and around the Massachusetts area will be processed 100%. So that's our little introduction. If you want to go through some slides, just basically we'll talk a few things about our glass. So this is gold. This is gold, and this is from NRRA. I love it. So we're receiving glass from the NRRA locations, different locations, amongst other locations in Maine and Massachusetts, Vermont, upstate New York, a little bit in Connecticut, which we're working on getting in the Connecticut area, trying to get some more glass. So this glass will be taken, it will be sorted, will be cleaned, separated by color for different companies. So we're servicing both the fiberglass industry and we're servicing the bottle industry. Currently, this glass will be going to the bottle industry. We're going to be separated. It separates by color: flint, amber, green, and blue. So there's blue glass that's for your 1664 beer and for your Sky vodka for those who enjoy those two beverages. You want to go to the next slide? So this glass is when we separate by color. The only reason we're going to the bottle industry first, because for the fiberglass industry in our Hopedale, we are going towards step 2, which is another process where the glass is still separated and pulverized completely to about 14 mesh. That would be for the fiberglass industry. And why it has to be separated? Because some of the companies do not tolerate a certain percentage of amber, a certain percentage of blue. They cannot exceed 4 to 5% because of the higher lead and iron content in the glass. As you can see, this photo here, this was a glass that we received, and the biggest enemy of the glass industry is ceramic. That's a toilet bowl. So somebody broke up a toilet bowl and thought it could be recycled. So ceramic, porcelain, rock, stone, Pyrex, that is not acceptable, only because the temperature to melt down that vis-a-vis the glass is a lot higher. And what happens with, especially a ceramic, those are big pieces we're able to take out. And we have optical filters that remove all the ceramic, but if any bit of ceramic gets through, it's a nightmare. For the bottle industry, it's a nightmare because they only accept 50 grams per metric ton. So that's barely a handful per metric ton. So we're really, really precise, and if we ever get a claim, we hope we never do, but what we've had in the past, it's very expensive because what happens is it's not only the load, because if the load gets offloaded into a silo, well, you've contaminated the entire silo. And if the load finds its way through the production line, well, you're contaminating their entire line. So that's a problem. So ceramic, this is why we're really, really, really we push and we ask that you do not tolerate any ceramic, porcelain, or anything like that. Go to the next slide. A handful like that is a nightmare for us, and that's just pulling out different samples. We're able to take out the plastic rings, we're able to take out the aluminum and the steel caps, the metal caps, because through our system we have eddy currents and magnets. We purify the glass. The glass is really, once it's processed and it's heading for the bottle industry or the fiberglass industry, which we produce up in Saint Jean solution here, it has to be pure. It has to be pure in order to put it to market. Next screen. This is how clean, once, as you saw, once the glass is crushed for the first time, this is glass that's going to be ready to go to the fiberglass industry. So what we do is that we process it, we clean it, and as you can see, I could see a piece of contamination right there, that pink thing. But that goes through again. Once it goes through the line, it gets broken down again. It goes through another eddy current, another magnet, in the event that there's any more contamination through the glass process. It goes through all kinds of vacuums. Go through all kinds of vacuums that pull out any contamination, and it's fine grind to 14 mesh, which is like a sand, and it goes to into the fiberglass industry. We'll go to the next step. And see, this is our pure clean. This is flint. This is our just to show you how clean it gets. This is glass that we process, we clean, and we forward to. This would happen to go to probably. But it looks like they went to OI in Montreal, and so we produce on average for them about 20,000 tons a year. When we talk about tons a year, it's metric tons, so it's 2,200 pounds per metric ton. That's just split, and there's not enough of glass for them. As we bring in more, they want more, and so that's why we're working so closely with the NRRA people and others like that, because we supply both our Montreal and our Oakdale, Massachusetts facility. So that's pure. I mean, you can't get cleaner than that. As you noticed from the very first picture that we had, you had blue, you had green, you had amber, and then you had the contamination. A final product like that is it's worth its weight in gold. So we're pretty proud of what we're doing. And you see, this is the fiberglass. You see, it's broken down, it's pulverized down. And if you notice, you'll see a speck of blue, but very little. You'll have some amber, but predominantly it's crushed down to sand, and that's for the fiberglass industry. Next.
So we're down to about 1 minute here.
Excuse me?
I was gonna say we're down to about 1 minute if you're able to go through the
We're
last
good.
couple of months.
So this is like your bottle bale glass. This is all your deposit bottles, and that's broken down separately because it doesn't have to go through the same process. The only thing is broken down caps and aluminum roof, and that's it. That's it. My name is Francois Yerfino. If you need any help, you have to process glass to clean, reach me at my email address or call me directly. Thank you for taking the time and listening to us, and congratulations, NRRA. Wonderful working with you.
Great. Thank you to all our speakers for near perfect timing on them in each case. That was fantastic. I didn't have to interrupt at all. I know we have a couple of questions in the chat. Ira, it looks like the first one's to you. A question on metals as to why is steel so expensive right now?
Well, I think it goes back to the old economics 101 that that supply demand curve and trying to achieve that equilibrium. I think we all could agree that the last 15 months has created some pent up demand in a lot of different spaces, whether it's personally or professionally. And the manufacturing sector is no different. So I think that there's capacity issues or challenges. There's currency, there's inflation concerns, there's liquidity. And at the same time, as we all kind of listen to our news outlets and put things together as business leaders and managers, there's a certain amount of calculated risk that how much can we take and do we have, in terms of processing to then turn out a new widget or gadget. And until the world gets turned back on in full, I think that there's going to be some increased pricing for certain commodities and or raw materials because of just that equilibrium has not been achieved yet, like it once was in 2019. Hopefully producers will be able to manage their order books and the consumption will be somewhat leveled, if you will, because the inflation and the increase in pricing could be somewhat self-inflicted if people take an opportunity, in my opinion, to overprice things. But as long as the supply demand curve can kind of maintain that equilibrium, hopefully it will normalize in time to come. But for right now, it's there's a limited capacity and there's a huge amount of demand, and therefore price is going to increase to steer the goods in one direction or another, similar to if anyone's purchased 2x4s lately, or wood or any type of building product.
So are you saying this one is universal, or is this I know periodically we end up with specific international markets that either overproduce or a mill shuts down and things you don't expect affect the market because it's so international with scrap metal. Is this sort of universal, domestic?
I think that, yeah, I think it's global right now. The last time we saw the inverse of this back in like 2011, 2012, where the China market, they dumped a bunch of iron ore into the marketplace and they used their processing capacity for steel production, and they flooded the market with new production steel as well. So ferrous prices dropped like a rock. Now you have a situation where things are turning back on. There's a huge demand to, make transmission casings, make wiring harnesses, all these things that go into the things that we use in these durable goods. There's not as many players, there's not as many outlets, and there's a limited capacity to produce these items and get them back into these manufacturing streams. And until more things are turned back on, take an iPhone goes to several different countries and ships back and forth multiple times before it's actually a phone. Same thing's happening with cars. There's a huge semiconductor shortage. The supply chain has been disrupted for so long that until everything gets caught up, I think that we're going to see price tags a bit higher than we're accustomed to.
Moving over to Dave, one for you. You saw a picture of Scott tissue in your presentation. It doesn't seem to have a label regarding post-consumer content, which I know some people have used but not advertised. Some people have made the decision to brand that way. Can you talk a little bit about that post-consumer and how folks can support that market if they're not branding themselves as a recycled product?
Well, I know very little about this subject. However, I believe we have a truth in advertising law in the United States for the consumer. This is why when you pick up a package, it has every ingredient in there. Not all of our material, toilet paper, I assume, comes from here. Some of it's made in other countries and imported in, like a lot of our goods. It's very expensive to use raw virgin material to make a disposable item like tissue. So I'm not too sure if they would go out of their way to, try to game the system if they had access to trees, that sort of thing, cut down. It doesn't make any sense. Again, I don't have the answers, and I couldn't give anybody a definitive answer why it wasn't on there. I was just trying to use the Cheerios box as a display of what to look for when you purchase an item, because it will be there for the most part.
No, and I think to jump in on that, I know one of the things historically that's been an issue is consistency of supply. So often you'll see a mill that will take whatever the cheapest fiber source is at a time, and they're considerable consumers of post-consumer content, but maybe not as consistently as you see somebody brand themselves as a recycled paper. So rather than come across with a label that says we use 50% content, we use 25% content, we use 100% content, they don't want to commit to the consistency of that supply, even though they are using recycled content. And I know I've heard that from a number of paper mills over the years, is that yes, they buy, but if all of a sudden there's a glut in the market and the price of virgin fiber is low, they're going to follow the price because that's their business model.
I would agree. No, I understand it's the supply demand curve, and you have to produce at the least expense and sell for the highest.
Right.
I mean, this is just basic economics 101. Someone once told me profit's not a four-letter word. So, we all like to be altruistic and do the right thing, but there does have to be an end game there.
And a quick follow-up question, Dave, does OPR take mixed paper and OCC from municipal customers via transfer station, or are you primarily dealing with commercial institutional sources for that?
Well, we deal with the NRRA. We get a lot of our material from the NRRA. Thank you very much. And we also take it, no, really, it's very important. Good source. And we do take it from municipalities, but we don't do single stream. The world, that single stream model, which a lot of particularly in Eastern Massachusetts, the municipalities use, has become quite expensive. For example, the city of Hartford, Connecticut pays $90 a ton to process their single stream recycling. I mean, that's very expensive for the taxpayer and the community, and it drains revenues for other sources. If we can get our towns and our people to just double sort, it's quite simple. Glass, plastics one, paper and another. It would reduce expense and enhance profitability for their own programs, and then you can expand to other things. Glass is a 900-pound gorilla in this state, and we're still looking for the right answer. So Francois, keep it going. More the merrier. Bring more to Massachusetts and New Hampshire. Thank you.
We're ready.
So along those lines, to keep you engaged in it, Francois, we had a question about glass. One of the towns can recycle glass, but it's tricky to transport for them and heavy to transport. And they're sort of struggling with that decision. Is it cheaper to put it in the hopper or to truck it somewhere to get recycled? So I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about that transfer economics with glass.
The heavier the glass, the lighter the pocketbook, because obviously every transport goes by weight. I think that speaks for itself. The best thing is what's being done at NRRA as well. And we have a lot of communities up in and what happened with NRRA, it just sparked the plug up in Quebec as well. I have about 73 different municipalities like the NRRA family, and I get on a daily basis multiple roll-ups or dump trucks on a regular basis. And I think that would be the best thing, going to, like, NRA has 6 or 7 different locations that can take that glass, provided that it's always clean. There's a home for this glass, and us coming down into Massachusetts, it's going to help logistically lower the costs as well for your transport. Because just remember, for the last few years when we started this program, our friends, we were bringing that glass up to our Saint Jean sur Richelieu here. So now we're able to do it there.
I guess a question for all of you, as people are looking at recycling for sustainability reasons, one question that comes up is the impact of all of those tractor trailers transporting materials, pictures of trucks idling at the docks trying to ship material, gets people concerned when they hear they're doing this for sustainability and there's an awful lot of emissions there. So I'm wondering if any of you have looked at any of that, if that keeps coming up with any of your markets, or if this is still primarily a scrap industry where dollars are making decisions.
My experience, it's a scrap industry decision.
I think from a transportation standpoint, there's a lot of hurdles in front of us, but a lot of really good technology that's on the horizon. I mean, I don't know if anyone's seen that FedEx commercial lately where they're going towards a reusable envelope package. And they've also, I think it's like 2040, they've committed to be carbon neutral. You think of all those trucks driving around, Mr. Musk and company need to come up with a lot of, electric motor and battery utilization and chassis configuration, so that as a planet, as a society, we can get away from the fossil fuel engines.
And I think in many cases, for folks that aren't as familiar with it, this is not a round trip market the way it used to be. So it's not like a roll-off container that's going out and coming back empty. When you're dealing with commodities, it's a whole logistics game, and there's people a lot smarter than me in this world to map out exactly where a truck goes most efficiently. So the delivering product on one end and backhauling scrap on another, and making sure that every one of those loads is done as efficiently as possible. So that industry doesn't have as much waste as you might think when you look at it. And I always marvel at how impressive some of those logistics people are. Along those lines, Dave, I guess it's a question more for you. Are you getting into issues with people, again, as sustainability drives some of the why people are recycling, the issue of paper especially being a carbon sink as trees grow? It sucks carbon dioxide out of the air, but then you cut the tree down and that carbon dioxide is released. Are you seeing any pushback in that industry? I mean, it seems, I know the paper people, the American Forest and Paper Association seems to think that's essentially a net zero market in terms of carbon. But there's always that historical piece, you know, we want to move away from paper to save the trees. But then you do when somebody cuts down the forest anyway to build a housing project or something else. So have you seen any change in the dynamic of that or the conversation around that?
Not personally. I mean, I just, you know, we recycle because we want to. I think that's been ingrained in us since the beginning that, you know, it came when it hit in the early 70s, you know, when it really started to become part of our society and part of the way we live. People do it. I think people want to do the right thing. It's not a glamorous industry, so you're not going to get all kinds of press and things like that. This is what part of the issue. One day a year we have Earth Day and then Earth Week, but then it kind of gets to the back of the plate and people put out their blue bins, and you know, we all hope to do the right thing and we try to teach our children the same way. I'm 65. I look around, the world's a lot cleaner and a lot nicer now than it was when I was a kid. And I think that's just an effort by society as a whole. You know, that's just me.
Right. And then in glass, the beauty of glass is that it's an endless product that could be recycled over and over. That bottle could be recycled thousands of times. It's not a problem. It goes back into the fiberglass or into the bottle or other products. We have companies that turn around and make glass, make terrazzo, or make tiles, or they make kitchen counters. So you know, it's an endless product to recycle. And what David also said, or I think Roger, there's not that much recycling out there that you think. There's a shortage of good recyclable material. And the single stream, I think David hit right on the nose. That single stream was an economic fiasco. It was only meant to save money. It didn't better the product. You have to double sort. You have to, you know, separate your glass and your plastic from your paper, because having paper experience myself, we were forced to sell our number 8 news and number 6 news into China because the local mills in North America wouldn't want them.
They want it now.
And I think, Francois, you touched on it, but I think there's a mixed story people are hearing with glass. I'm wondering if you can touch on, because a number of MRFs don't want it because it's a difficult material for a lot of MRFs to process. And it goes to that question that I think a lot of the public has been misled, the distinction between what's processable versus what's recyclable, what's got a demand for the end market versus what has a demand for an intermediary processor. And I know that's been a struggle that the media has not done well with. And there's a perception, for example, that whatever a MRF takes is what's recyclable as opposed to what's processable. And glass, it seems like more than anything right now, that dichotomy is out there of, you hear from glass end markets and there's a huge demand for glass. But you talk to MRF operators and many of them would just as soon drop glass altogether from the program. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little about that.
I understand their frustrations. I ran our own MRF. At one point, we were taking a single stream and we had the glass to contend with. The problem is not because it's only difficult, it's a care on the equipment. Basically, that's the primary. As at the end result, when you're cleaning MRF glass, we're going to invoice you for the glass. We're not going to take the glass at zero, or we're not going to give anybody a pass, because what happens with these MRFs, unfortunately, we get more than glass in what they send us. We get more than glass. We get things that we're stuck to landfill, not the glass, but the byproduct that they're sending us. So you could imagine what we're getting in there. So, but all glass is recyclable at 100%. We have a system in our place. We're not taking curbside at the moment, but we had taken curbside where we're able to separate all the contamination from the glass, separate the glass from color, by color, and market the glass. So all glass is recyclable, 100%. That's our experience.
Question for Ira. Do you have any sense of what percentage of Schnitzer's metals stay domestic and what percentage go overseas? And I'm assuming that changes significantly over time,
Yeah.
potentially, as markets change.
Yep. So there's a couple things there. I wouldn't be able to put an exact figure on it, and really, it's you got two different universes of or streams of metal, really. So from a ferrous standpoint, I would say the vast majority of light iron that's processed into shred, and plate and structural steel, heavy melt steel, the majority of that is going to go export. Now, whether that's to Europe or Turkey, South America, Mexico, it all depends on the market. And there's a lot of countries that are developing infrastructure to be more of a global player. But the capacity in the United States is limited, and the infrastructure in the United States to take in scrap streams is also very limited. So an exporter, or a company like Sims or EMR or other large scrap companies, depending upon the flavor, you're going to go to where they can consume it and where they can process it. So India is becoming a big outlet for various streams of scrap metal. China was for a long time, and then they retracted, and a lot of those entities that were in various provinces are now in Taiwan, Vietnam, Malaysia, and it really just depends upon what's the reality of their ability to consume and process and these things back out into reusable products. So I would say, on a ferrous side, probably 80 to 90% is exported. If I had to guess, I'm sure it's in our annual report. And on a non-ferrous side, it could be 50-50, it could be 60-40, it all depends. I will say that the company Schnitzer is put a lot of money into research and development and technology so that we can keep as much material in the United States as possible, processed to the nth degree to separate things as far as we can. So we have pure buckets of brass, of copper, of aluminum, of stainless steel, and so on and so forth, so that it reduces what's going to a landfill and it maximizes what we can send and keep within the borders of the United States. And we did that a couple of years ago with our wire granulator system that we have in Concord. We used to ship pretty much all of our wire internationally, and now everything is kept in the United States because we're making a product that we can now sell to copper mills in the United States, whereas prior to that, there's only a couple of 3 or 4 places on the East Coast that could actually take insulated wire. Otherwise, you'd have to sell it.
Francois, another question on glass. I'm wondering if you can help with some guidance. One of the things I think a lot of towns struggle with is how much material they need to access different markets. So there's a question of, do they go into a fiberglass market, into a glass market, or do they not have enough and do they keep it local to use as processed glass aggregate? And with many NRRA towns having access to multiple markets, do you find that there's a rule of thumb in terms of how much you need to access your marketplace that, maybe guidance for some of the smaller towns that have to wonder how much to aggregate?
We don't have enough glass to supply the demand. Obviously, aggregate scares me. We would rather take that bottle and give it life, returning it into another bottle or a fiberglass. So we have a shortage. I mean, there's especially in the amber and there's a shortage of glass, good clean glass, and that's one of the reasons also that we're in the Massachusetts area. It's a great area to source glass, and there's close to the Massachusetts, and Rhode Island, Connecticut, Maine. So we have more accessibility, and logistically makes sense. I can't afford to bring up glass from Massachusetts up to Canada and process it. We're looking for more and more glass. And that's the reason we're down there. We're looking actually at a third facility, which we'll be announcing shortly, at the third facility in the United States. So no, there's not enough glass. There's still a lot of glass going to landfill, or unfortunately, but we're going to try to encourage cities, communities, companies.
One other glass question before we jump off of it. I think it's an interesting one. We talk a lot about glass being infinitely recyclable, which we've always known from a bottle to bottle market. But what about in a fiberglass market? Once it becomes fiberglass, is that fiberglass then recyclable the same way a bottle would be?
I'm hearing rumors that they are working on a recyclable fiberglass. Currently, no, it's not recyclable. It just goes into the walls, but it goes to the walls forever until you destroy the home. But I'm hearing that some of the major fiberglass companies are looking at recycling the fiberglass that is out of homes, recycling it and turning it into fiberglass again. So that's rumor at the moment, but anybody in the fiberglass industry is listening, maybe they could yay or nay what I had heard.
And I think, do you think that's the green building market driving that demand for, I mean, I'm assuming a LEED or some of the other methods that are out there for registering green buildings, you know, recyclability in building products has become an issue for a lot of folks. I'm guessing that may be a factor in driving the fiberglass industry's demand for recyclable product.
There's more points out there if you become LEED, that's for sure. There are more and more architectural companies going around and requesting, you know, that you become LEED, or you get the products that you build, the buildings are LEED. And you know, I can't answer further than that. I know of it, but I have no direct knowledge on how they operate these programs.
No, and I think that's the important thing I think you see from a lot of the NRRA towns. It's what's always excited about being a board member is that model where towns can aggregate smaller milk runs of stuff and access markets they wouldn't otherwise be able to do. I think is hugely helpful to get decent quality commodity to market. One of the big questions that comes out there, and I guess the same question, Dave, applies to the paper industry, is that how often does something get recycled? You know, the theory is always we can recycle something indefinitely. Obviously, there's a shelf life to how many times paper can be recycled. There's a shelf life to certain glass products. You know, plastics has long been accused of making, you know, parking stops and single-use things that are just deferring disposal of stuff. Can you talk a little bit about that and why it may be important to recycle stuff back to its highest best use to get the most life out of it before it gets disposed of?
Well, the thing with paper is that it has a limited lifespan. It's depending on the fiber that's in the recycled product. Newspaper, phone books, that groundwood, it had nothing in it. You get a nice heavy brown box from the States. It has a high quality strength. It's well known. In Europe, it's about 1/2 the strength of ours. And in Asia, it's about 1/10. So when you buy a product that comes from an Asian market, the quality of the packaging is pretty much spent. This is the main driver of how many times it can be used. Obviously, something that, you know, came from a virgin product that was straight pulp, it's of a higher quality, a higher density, and that product can be reused a number of times. It'll go through the machine, but eventually it reaches a point where you just can't extract any more fiber from it. It's just mush. So it's hard to say. I mean, depending, you got to hold up what you get. Like that Sam Adams box, it's kind of like one and done. Maybe might be an egg crate the next time.
One question for all of you, and I think it may have come up in one of the other sessions. We tend to measure recycling based on what goes in the front door of somewhere. And we seem to miss the discussion of recovery rate within a facility and backing out residue from any of our, especially regulations, metrics by which we measure recycling. It's the one thing I didn't see in any of your processes other than incidental was that question of residue, or that question of what percentage of stuff going through a process gets recycled. I think it's one of the questions that really becomes an issue with MRFs is what percentage of that really does get recovered. And I'm wondering as we start to close this up, whether you guys can talk a little bit about that in terms of recovery rate that you see, or whether you see a lot of that residue come out before it ever gets to you.
From my experience, we see most of it's already been sorted out, screened out. I would venture to guess probably around 95% before it gets to us, at least. That would be, from us. I'm not sure about the other two industries.
For scrap metal, it varies from commodity to commodity. And a lot of that is reflected in, the price per pound or the price per ton. So an item like steel turnings or tin cans, the chemistry and the inherent loss just due to the fraction size, density, whatever, is much different than plate and structural steel. And then you got, light iron in the middle. So when you introduce those items to tremendous amounts of heat and energy, you have to factor in that inherent loss. And similar to, if you have high distribution cable, 500 MCM, the copper yield on that's going to be much different than an extension cord attached to a lamp that you buy at Target. So it all depends on what it is you're looking at, how is it going to be processed, how much contamination, in the world of aluminum, that might be copper, in steel, that could be concrete, wood, dirt, rubber, what have you. So it's really commodity to commodity and site specific on how much money is invested into the infrastructure to recover as much as possible. Which is why there's secondary scrap streams after the first process has already taken place.
Great. I think with that, Francois, real quick before we wrap this up, we're starting to get the high side. We're about done.
We're processing 95 to 99% of all the glass that comes in, and there's no OBM for glass. Glass has always been the rock bottom in pricing, so I mean we're working volume. That's how we're working.
Thank you all. Before I turn this back over to folks at NRRA, so thank you all. This has been extremely helpful and I think interesting for most of our folks.
Thank you, Roger.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Roger, Francois, Ira, and Dave, for the great information and really conversation about a sample of, vendors we work with over, different commodities. Really appreciated. And at this time, I would like to introduce Joan Cudworth, who is Director of Public Works for the town of Hollis, New Hampshire, and NRRA Board President, for some remarks.
Thank you very much, Heather. First of all, I'd like to say, wow, what a great 2 days we've had. On behalf of the Board of Trustees and the NRRA staff, I'd like to thank our sponsors, our speakers, and our moderators that participated in this year's conference. And to the NRRA staff for making the conference possible. You all are truly amazing individuals. I want to thank all the attendees for making time to participate and join in the virtual conference this year. After the past challenging year and sometimes negative news about recycling, it's good to remind ourselves that recycling and waste reduction do achieve positive results. We learned great success stories over the past 2 days. Speakers spoke about their slogans they're using, their flyers they're creating, the websites they provided for us to look into, the new mills we heard about, new market specs, and some great questions that were put out there with great answers. And I hope the NRRA staff and I hope that you leave the conference with practical information to help your communities recycle and reduce their waste. If you enjoyed the conference and you're not a member yet, I encourage you to join. There's so much wealth and knowledge within NRRA. And if you enjoyed the conference and you're already a member, I encourage you to get more involved. If you haven't participated in a MOM meeting, which is a members operation meeting, they're wonderful meetings. It's members helping members. It's so much information that is provided to you. So I highly recommend, if you haven't tried a MOM meeting, please do so. Please join us next year for NRRA's annual recycling conference on May 16th and 17th, 2022 at the Doubletree by Hilton in Manchester, New Hampshire. And it's a reminder to please complete the post-workshop survey. We appreciate and welcome your feedback. I want to thank you all for attending and have a great summer. And this is Recycling at its Best. This was a great 2 days. And I, again, want to thank everybody who participated in this. And I hope you have a great day.